two, and you are live.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the February 5th, 2025 Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. I'd like to introduce City Attorney Jennifer Vega. Ms. Vega, please explain the role of public comment.
Mr. Chair and committee members, during citizen comment, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona Open Meetings Law permits the subcommittee members to listen to the comments, but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matters presented. Members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items to be discussed. Comments must be related to the agenda item and the action being considered by the subcommittee. The City Council and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters related to pending investigations, claims, or litigation. Thank you.
Thank you. I would also like to introduce our interpreter, Elsie Duarte, who will provide a brief announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. My name is Elsie Duarte. I will be servicing as Spanish interpreter for today's Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee session. I will now take a moment to introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience and review some guidelines. Buenos días, bienvenidos a la sesión de la Subcomisión de Seguridad Pública y Justicia. Mi nombre es Elsie Duarte y estaré sirviéndoles como intérprete a nuestra audiencia de habla hispana. Deseamos pedirles antemano si va a dar un comentario público, por favor, hable despacio, con claridad y evite tener distracciones de fondo. Finalmente, pause después de cada una o dos oraciones para poder interpretar lo que esté diciendo de la manera más completa posible. Gracias. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Elsie. Okay, we'll start the subcommittee meeting with a call to the public. I believe we have a speaker.
Yes, Chairman. Orla Bobo is here to speak for public comment.
Thank you. Ms. Bobo?
Good morning. My name is Orla Bobo, and I live in District 2. For the past 2 years, I've been fighting for my community and first responders because Phoenix fire response times are at crisis levels and have been for several years. Citywide response time averages are 2 to 3 minutes over the National Fire Protection Agency standard. I have multiple public records that show double and triple response times for Code 3 emergencies. Phoenix firefighters have been calling for help in the citywide response time crisis for many years. Both fire and police don't have the resources they need to do their jobs. This is exactly what happened with the LA fires. The LA fire chief stated that the underfunding of her department helped lead to the catastrophe in LA, saying it was, quote, underfunded, understaffed, and under-resourced. This exact situation applies to Phoenix Fire Department as well. The City of Phoenix is not taking accountability and is now trying to blame the funding issue on a rental tax cut that just went into effect January of this year. However, this crisis has been going on for at least a decade, and city leaders are fully aware, as evidenced in multiple public safety meetings, news stories, as well as all of my communications with them for the past 2 years. Just a few weeks ago, in a KTR interview, Phoenix Fire Labor President Brian Willingham stated, "The city can't keep pace with the growth of the valley, and the city has been behind for 15 to 20 years." The City of Phoenix is again asking taxpayers for more money through a sales tax increase. However, the city is spending $50 million on trees and shade screens, $20 million on a multicultural center, and $27 million on park pools and splash pads. If you're going to ask the taxpayers for more money, then you need to divert all emergency spending to fully fund our public safety. Phoenix Police and Fire are also facing recruitment challenges. The word is out that the City of Phoenix is underfunding public safety and candidates are choosing other city police and fire departments. 100 Phoenix fire captains are currently suing the city for claims they were underpaid for years. Why should Phoenix fire captains have to sue the city that they serve in order to get the pay that they are owed? The city should consider an open forum for firefighters' input to help hear ideas about how best to solve the response time crisis. We need to hear from the boots on the ground instead of conducting studies about it. I looked at the fire department data that was being presented today. The response times shown are for Rescue 45 and 49 only, and just for the past 2 months. The way to show if those two rescues are having an impact in District 2 is to show the overall response times in District 2. That is the only real measure of their impact. It is important to note that the fire engines and ladders are the true first responders to any emergency. A rescue
Ms.
is
Bobo, please wrap it up. Give you 5 more seconds.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item number 1 is approval of Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee meeting minutes from January 8th, 2025. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, passes unanimously. Thank you very much for that. Our first presentation today is on item number 2. We'll welcome to the table Marcus Coleman, Light Rail Administrator, Police Commander Leif Myers, and Adrian Reese from Valley Metro, and they will provide an update on light rail security efforts. So, Adrian, Marcus, and Leif, welcome.
Good morning, Chair, members of the subcommittee. We are thankful to have this opportunity to be in front of this subcommittee again today to talk about the important subject of light rail security. We came before this subcommittee late last year with an update of where efforts that were being undergone to improve our security along our light rail system. And today, we will give an update of all those efforts and some of the impacts that have taken place along our light rail system. I have with me today Commander Leif Myers, as well as Adrian Ruiz, who is with Valley Metro, their Director of Safety and Security. And with that, I will hand the presentation over so Leif Myers can get us continued through the presentation.
Good morning, Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee. I'm Commander Leif Myers. I oversee the Traffic Bureau, which encompasses the transit unit. Thank you for your time this morning and the opportunity to provide you with an overview of the Phoenix Police Department's transit unit. Our function and mission of the Phoenix Police Department's transit unit is to review and investigate criminal cases related to public transportation. We provide daily support to Valley Metro Contract Security, and we respond to transit-related calls for service. The unique thing about our unit is we are case-carrying detectives, and we maintain and manage all of our caseload, the majority of our caseload, depending on the crime type. And lastly, we provide investigative and technical support to other bureaus and other city departments. Our current staffing and deployment model consists of 4 enforcement squads, 2 first shift, 2 second shift, which encompasses 13 detectives and 24 police assistants. Currently, we have 4 sworn vacancies within that unit, so our max staffing would be 17 for our enforcement squads. In addition to our enforcement squads, we also are staffed with an explosive detection canine squad, which is 3 canine teams. That's 3 canine handlers and 3 dogs. The function and mission of our canine teams, to give you a global view, is to provide active partnership with our Transportation Security Administration. We provide services to downtown special events, patrol light rail alignment, and respond to calls for service. A calendar year snapshot of our transit unit canine teams of 2024. We participated in over 90 downtown events, which consisted of over 2,500 staffing hours. These hours are highly visible positions on the platforms in dense populations, typically around sporting events and concerts. The snapshot of our enforcement teams for calendar year 2024, we did over 1,400 criminal investigative reports. Again, we're case-carrying detectives. We maintained a 97% clearance rate for those cases retained by our unit. We made over 1,700 arrests, and we submitted over 4,500 criminal charges for prosecution. Of those 1,700 arrests, the main categories were warrants, both felony and misdemeanor, trespassing, drug offenses, drug paraphernalia, simple and major assaults as well. In September of 2023, we implemented an enhanced light rail security plan. We provided support to Valley Metro's contract security as they board the trains. We provided a public safety presence, assisted with trespassing violations, conducted enforcement in obviously aggravated situations. These operations are currently conducted twice a week, and the location of operations are based upon trends, community input, and concerns. A year snapshot from when we implemented the program, so from September 2023 to September 2024, our enhanced light rail security plan we touched over 900 trains, which consisted of over 3,400 passengers present. We recovered over 860 fares. We issued over 2,000 trespass warnings, over 3,200 citations were issued, and we made over 800 arrests. Not just making arrests, lastly is the community engagement partnership, and this is very important. The transit unit fosters partnerships and addresses community concerns along the light rail route. We attend block watch meetings regularly and attend community events. We actively engage in their concerns and input. Some of the community partnerships we're a part of is the VIP Coalition, the Bell Road Community, the Hatcher Road Community, 19th Avenue, 27th Avenue Community. As the light rail continues to move further south, we are actively partnering with the South Mountain Precinct, as well as the community groups there, and actively engaging the South Mountain Precincts as well. That concludes the PD portion. I'll turn it over to Valley Metro for the remaining.
Thank you, Commander. And good morning, Chair and members of the Subcommittee for Public Safety and Justice. My name is Adrian Reese. I'm the Director of Safety and Security for Valley Metro, and I have a brief presentation follow-up from our last formal presentation. Our security strategy includes a focus on rider experience and command presence. We want to improve the perception of security with the additional presence and investment by all staff and contractors. We want to engage and empower our team members to command and control the environment. We want to own it, keep it clean, inviting, on time, and secure. Our partnership with law enforcement are one of the key strategies to the layered approach with a physical presence of security and police. Speaking to presence and vacancies, from January to June of '24, we experienced some of the highest levels of vacancy. Following the board-approved wage increase in July of '24, we saw a reduction in those vacancies over the next 6 months. The key performing metric or improvement is the reduction in vacancies lends to more presence and capabilities on board and on platforms. We have seen an average now in this current calendar year of 3 to 5% vacancy, and in some weeks, as in this week, 0. When riders see ownership via presence by security, we increase the opportunity to improve the perception and impact behaviors. We still must have a layer of police presence. We also saw an increase in ridership for '24 of 3.82%. Customer experience coordinators. Initiated in 2019 as part of the broader Respect the Ride program, the role and objective of the CEC is to enhance the rail experience. They are focused on customer engagement and education. They also provide additional, visible, helpful presence across the full system. Currently, we have 11 CECs. With the extension of South Central, we plan to add 3 more for a total of 14. Specific now to statistics, in Phoenix for the calendar year of '24, there were a total of 86 reported incidents for a rate of 1.46 incidents per 100,000 boardings. A detail to highlight is the comparison between January to June and July to December, where we show a 20% decrease in passenger assaults.
Councilman Waring.
Thank you. So in one of the previous slides, I forget exactly which one, you used the word perception of safety, and then you used it again. I don't think you mean perception. I think we actually want it to be safer. We don't want to trick people into thinking it's safe, and then they get assaulted, and we're like, surprise, it wasn't really that safe after all. So I think maybe rewording that going forward would be in order. The 20% decrease in passenger assaults, how many were there, because it doesn't say, between January and June of 2024 and then July and December?
Thank you for the question. I can provide that for you, Councilman. And for January to June, we had a total of, I'm sorry, I'm going through my notes. We had a total of, if we're speaking directly to the January to June, of 20 passenger assaults. July to December, 16 passenger assaults reported. I also have the breakdown for the corridor.
I don't think it can be what I think it is. So I believe it was still on the police portion, but you should be familiar because we just had it. It said from September 2023 to September 2024, there were 34,581 passengers present on 906 trains. That seems, the 34,000 seems to me a shockingly low number for what we spend on light rail for a full year. Is that number how many people were actually on the light rail during that entire period of time, a full year? That doesn't seem like it could be possibly that low. So maybe police can address if I'm misreading this. I don't know what else it would be given what's written here, but I'm assuming I must be missing something.
Chairman Robbins and Councilman Waring, it's a good question. Members of the subcommittee, that's when we did the fare enforcement. So when we boarded the trains, those are the numbers that we got from when we did the fare enforcement.
So that's only when you were doing the fare enforcement, not all the ridership. Yes. Okay, I'm trying to put in context. The reason I bring this up now, I was going to ask it later, was in relation to like how many assaults would I expect? So I guess I don't have the full ridership number. It's hard to say. We want it to be obviously 0 assaults, but it is a little hard to say without knowing how many people are actually riding compared to how many would be driving in their cars, where I suppose an assault could happen, but it seems more unlikely.
Thank you for the question, Chair and members of the Public Safety Justice Subcommittee. Our ridership for 2003 was 9.9 million, and for ridership of 24 was 10.2 million. So we had a 3.82% increase.
Those members make a lot more sense than 34,000.
Yes,
I was like,
yes.
I think you guys probably know I'm not the biggest fan of light rail, but I knew it was moving more people than that. So, okay, at least it's moving in the right direction, and you've got more security on the trains, which could help address potential incidents before they happen. I mean, it's great, don't get me wrong, it's great to solve crimes, but it's even better if they don't actually happen because people don't want it to happen because we got security there. So at least it's been some positive movement. Could you remind me, Mr. Chair, I forget, and I should remember because I think I called you in the second time. When was the last time you presented to us?
It was in 2023, a formal presentation, prior to the summer, prior to the board approval.
I didn't realize it had been that long.
Yes, we did a paper presentation update in last year, but we did a formal in 2020.
Okay, I didn't realize that much time had passed.
Yes, sir.
Again, trying to just put it in context, but at least some progress has been made since then.
Yes, sir.
So thank you for that. Sorry, Mr. Chair, go ahead.
Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you, Chairman. So I guess my questions were, I was just at a meeting 2 nights ago with some of my constituents, and we continue to hear a lot of the same reports where light rail on 19th Avenue from Dunlap all the way to Camelback still feels very unsafe. You know, when it comes to people not paying for their light rail, making sure and they are also saying that we have not been enforcing things onto the light rail. So I guess I just want to hear what is some of the feedback that you guys have along that corridor, because we keep hearing that folks don't want to ride the light rail, and from your reports, I mean, there's a decline in ridership. And I just wonder, you know, like I just want to know a little bit, Commander, what are some of those, some of the things that you guys have been doing along that corridor? Because we know that there's been a lot of challenges in that area. And I continue to hear from people that they don't feel that it's safe, that they don't ride the light rail as much as they would want to. A lot of people are, you know, that have kids, you know, that are now in college will prefer to buy a car instead of having their kids up on the light rail. So can you guys just talk a little bit about that in terms of what's happening along that corridor?
Yes, I will start us out, Chair and members of the subcommittee, and then kind of hand it down because there were several pieces of that. I want to make sure that everyone is able to get their fingerprints on it. But firstly, I wanted to make sure that we are very clear. The statement was made earlier about fair enforcement. This is not a fair enforcement. This is code compliance. So it's not just about fares. It's also about behaviors that take place. And so I don't want people to think that we're only looking at fares. To Councilman Waring's point that he was making earlier, we want to make sure that we have a safe environment and safe and enjoyable environment for all of our people who are riding and taking advantage of our public transit system. And so some of the things that we have done, and Adrian will be able to cover those things, is not only because of the low vacancy rate that we now experience with the Ally Universal, but with the customer experience coordinators, it's really about our ability to have a constant visualization along the light rail alignment, so that even if we don't have necessarily that security personnel there, we also have kind of ambassadors of a system that are there, similar to what you see in our downtown core. And they work in conjunction with our security system. We're really trying to make sure that we have a layered approach to this, so that everything is not met with a hammer. We understand that a hammer is not always the correct tool for each job. And so we need to make sure that we have layer approaches to this, so that we can respond correctly to whatever situation that we're seeing. If we're seeing someone is in need of services, that we have individuals we can have come and address that and those needs of service. If someone is violating our code of conduct, that we have security that is present to handle those things. And if anything escalates from outside of what's under the realm of our Ally Universal security contract, then we have our transit unit that will come, and also patrol that will come and respond to those calls. And so with that,
well, Marcus, I have some questions for you around that then.
Okay.
So what is the role of an ambassador?
So the role of the chair and members of the subcommittee, the role of the ambassador is to ensure that we have a presence on our light rail system. And when we say a presence, they are looking at the environment of the light rail system. So if there's something that they see that needs addressing attention, such as maintenance, such as cleanliness, things of that nature, they can be proactive in calling those things in. But they also are there to help people navigate the system. If people want to understand, how do I get from point A to point B, those customer experience coordinators will help them navigate that, understand what routes to take, when they can connect, also educate them on our Alert VM, educate them on our next ride programs and applications that we have, so that they have not only the tools for that ride, but tools for future rides, so they have a pleasant experience.
Thank you for that. And look, and I think all of you guys know that I've been a big fan of light rail and pushing to making sure that we get light rail. But when I continue to hear these reports, and especially along 19th Avenue, we all know 19th Avenue and 27th Avenue, we have two real-time operations centers in that area because of the challenges and the issues. And given that we're also neighbors to a city that does very little around homelessness, like it's very important to try to figure out how do we double down on some of those efforts along these areas. Because I continue to hear, and I've driven it myself, where people, children, parents, everyone is still seeing the drug dealing, on the light rail. People are still seeing the drugs, and people are still feeling that it's not safe. So I guess, Commander, I go to you next and asking, like, what are the efforts that we're doing? What is it that we can also do better?
Chairman Robinson, Councilwoman, members of the subcommittee, it's a good question. So 19th Avenue is an area that we constantly address. We've taken a holistic approach, not just one dedicated to the light rail. So we work with multiple stakeholders, multiple partners, not just with the transit unit, but that area along 19th Avenue covers multiple precincts. So we're constantly communicating with both precincts in that community, the community action officers. And what I hit on my last slide was the community engagement. We're with the 19th Avenue community. We constantly, it's not a one fix, it's multiple stakeholders, multiple involvements along that. We know that's an area that we constantly address, and that's why we seek input from multiple city partners as we work through that.
I mean, I guess I would just recommend on that, and I would like maybe to have another meeting about this, just along that corridor, because neighbors are not happy. Neighbors are very upset about what's happened in the last couple of months, and the uptake that they're seeing along that corridor. There was a moment where they felt it was better and things were getting a lot better in that area, but just the reports I've gotten in the last 48 hours, I think there might need to be a separate meeting to have with some of those neighbors, just for them to understand what is it that you guys are tackling, and then maybe getting some ideas from them. But thank you so much for all of the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you, Councilwoman. We'll definitely make sure that we reach out not only to that community, but if we wouldn't mind us using you as a resource, as a tool to help gain access to some of those residents that you've heard from, some of your constituents you've heard from. We would like to meet with them and really discuss this in further detail with them.
That's great. Yeah, let's talk about that offline. That'd be great. Thanks. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes.
First, just to double back, again, not criticizing, but you might want to change this presentation about the passengers present on the night. People, particularly in the age of Twitter, could take this number and put it out there and cite police as a source and have a very skewed view with no context of how many people are riding light rail. So I'm always, whenever I see something like this, the 34,581 number I meant before, yeah, it says enhanced light rail security plan up at the top, but it definitely could lead people. You guys know what you're talking about, but your reader doesn't necessarily, or they may be willfully ignorant, I guess I'll use that phrase, and want to believe what they want to believe. Me, I was sort of in the middle, because that brings me to my second point. That 19th Avenue, I've met with those neighbors over there. This is one where city policies, some of those neighbors will tell you, I can give you names, I could probably produce them here at a meeting, will tell you you ruined their neighborhood with light rail. It's not you guys sitting up at the table, you're just doing what you're told, but city put it on the ballot and voters voted for it, probably some in that neighborhood. I've had a firefighter who was with Phoenix for decades, who lived in his house for 40 years, you wrecked my neighborhood. A doctor and his dad, the dad's deceased, they had their office over there for 50 years, they finally gave up and moved. Didn't want to move, I don't know how many calls I made to police on their behalf. All of it was at the light rail. Parent of one of the kids at my kid's school, hey Jim, could you help? All my copper's been stolen. I went out there and did a video about the problems. Is it a quick trip over there? Chief, I forget. I mean, it was unbelievable what I saw in the middle of the afternoon. And everybody who lives over there assures me it wasn't like that before. So my issue is we're now taking police resources and resources that could be spent policing the rest of the city or making sure people don't get killed on our streets by drunk drivers or excessive speeders. And again, message for all of you who are anti-police. They were supposed to be at this meeting today, but I guess decided to no-show. If you take away all the police, then you have havoc just trying to drive to the grocery store. Food for thought. But I have an issue with resources now being diverted that could have arguably gone in some measure to District 2 that are now having to patrol a neighborhood where they tell me they really didn't have any of these problems before. So we do owe it to them to try to solve them, but at the same time, we can't divert all of our resources there. That's not fair to the rest of the city. Some of us who are living a happy light rail free life. So just don't want, every time we talk about stuff like this, I always feel like I got to throw that in because that's not fair to the rest of the city. It's not just on police resources, but we'll get to fire in a few minutes. But that's not right either. So Betty's right. Please try to address their issues. I don't doubt that they're occurring, but it was sad to hear their stories. But we also have to be cognizant that they're also, if there are 100,000 people who live in that general area, then we still got another 1.6 million we got to think about too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Coleman, did you have something you want to say?
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, I was just going to say, as Adrian continues to do her portion of the presentation, she will touch on some of the efforts that Valley Metro has done on their side, the Allied Universal Security side. So hopefully that will continue to show positive impacts and reduce the need that we have on our current police unit. We still need them. We still need that coordination. But hopefully that will help to address some of the things that you commented, Councilman Waring.
Yes, thank you. Addressing that specifically for the 19th corridor, we did institute a fixed post at 19th and Dunlap during all operating hours. That was done over a year ago in response to the issues and concerns we had at the plaza, so 19th North Plaza. We also have 24/7 presence at Metro Center. So upon opening that extension, we started off strong with 24/7 presence, 3 during peak hours and 2 overnight. Also, we have hourly patrols based on community input and incidents at 19th and Camelback. where we now operate out of that kiosk most of the time, if it's not a fair team that goes and patrols that park and ride hourly. We're also working with community members there on Pearson for that location. We also have the highest density of zones from 19th and Camelback to all the way to Metro Center. So we make sure we break out the zones to where it's not 4 to 5 platforms between zones, but it's more like 2 to 3. And we use Glendale and 19th as that step-off point for 2 of those zones. So making sure we spend ample time at Montebello and Glendale, and along with those fixed posts and rover patrols we've done exclusively for the corridor.
Okay, I have one real quick question for you, Adrian, if you don't mind. When we talk about community input, and it's been mentioned a couple different times, how would residents in the community, or anybody for that matter, how would they provide you with their concerns and any issues that they've encountered?
Thank you, Chair and members of the Public Safety Justice Subcommittee. Thank you for the question. A great way to do that, if it's a concern, non-emergency, is to use our Alert VM app. We do have an application that's rider-focused, that is 24/7 response. You are communicating to a person at a console who is reading your text and your message, and photos are also included. And you can be anonymous, or you can let us know exactly where you are. And we will follow up with you on that concern. So if you need to speak to an individual via email, you can send the concern directly to me. My email is available, as well as Don Schneidmiller, the security manager. But if someone is not getting the response they need from Alert VM, by all means, we can have the response sent to us and we can address it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll continue on. Just for the calendar year of 2024, system-wide, we had a total of 134 incidents for a rate of 1.41 per 100,000 boardings. When looking at the overall impact for the calendar year for the system, January to June of 24 compared to July to December of 24, we saw a reduction in reported passenger assaults of approximately 15% system-wide. An important aspect of that safety and security for our riders is maintenance, cleaning, and a welcoming environment. We take the proactive as well as the reactive service, detail cleaning every 45 days, terminus and end cleaning as well as on-demand, station cleaning 2 to 4 times depending on staffing, with the ability to respond reactively and through Alert VM, as mentioned previously, requests from passengers, that is the rider-facing application for non-emergencies, and pressure washing stations at least once a week. On to our fare modernization. We have been conducting extensive outreach for months, leading to the launch of all fare media types in both Spanish and English. Over 15,000 copper cards have been sold at retail partners such as grocery stores and convenience stores. 111 new fare vending machines, with 70 of those installed in Phoenix alone, and do have cash options. FSOs continue to engage and educate riders, working alongside our police partners to conduct code compliance programs. We also have successfully garnered 1 million taps on our copper cards just this month. Moving on to the security environment, Valley Metro has been working with city partners and stakeholders to rethink the elements and the environment in transit. A welcome and safe transit system begins with crime prevention through environmental design, or CEPTED. The Plaza 19 was revitalized in October of 24 to welcome the community to the space in an event promoting local businesses and activities. This ownership is what has been missing from this space, and we are excited to see what the community continues to develop. Along with the crime prevention through environmental design improvements in Plaza 19, Valley Metro is working with a design consultant to further investigate CEPTED improvements from our stations, our trains, our infrastructure across the system, and we expect that report to be complete this spring. The procurement process for a new fare inspection security services contract is underway. Just a couple of highlights to this new procurement include a refreshed scope of work to include a 1-year contract with 4 one-year options. This allows us to be nimble and the contractor to earn each renewal. Another procurement objective includes a primary and secondary award. This allows us to, without board approval, to more effectively pivot to the secondary contractor if the primary is not meeting contractual obligations. We're expected to move this forward to the board this February. Key performance areas we highlighted for the new scope is that contractor accountability, maximizing the staffing, enhancement of key personnel experience to include more experience for account manager and assistant account manager and supervisors, training, a more robust field training program with assessments, mental crisis management and de-escalation. Data analysis and reporting, we included in the scope the contractor is obligated to analyze the data reviewed and propose or improve deployment models, tactics, programs to address issues, of course with Security Department approval. The new contract is scheduled to begin spring of this year, ahead of South Central. And finally, our future actions include the momentum to continue the excellent collaboration with our police partners. It has been a pleasure working alongside with Lieutenant Greg Hernandez and his team of the Transit Unit. Under his leadership, he has created a spirit of teamwork and partnership. And we are excited to continue working with the unit and the police precincts as we expand our services to baseline. And I know we will have a collaborative effort along with that layered approach with law enforcement presence. We look forward to the continuation of the code compliance programs, the implementation of a new Fair Inspection Security Services contract, and the expansion of Valley Metro and security workforce ahead of South Central. And Chair and members of the subcommittee, that concludes my presentation. If you have any further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And Vice Mayor O'Brien.
Thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate it. And thank you for today's presentation. On slide 7, I hope that's slide 7, you talk about how many investigative reports and clearance rates, and congratulations. I'm going to probably start to sound like a broken record, but I'd really love to know how many folks did we prosecute, or how many did, not you all, but the county or the city, how many prosecutions did we get, or plea deals, because that's another important piece of the puzzle. On slide 10, thank you for the fair enforcement increases as well. You list, as Councilman Waring talked about, the passengers present, fare recoveries, trespass warnings. Did we have any folks that were actually trespassed off the light rail? Does that occur, and can you speak to that?
Chairman Robinson, Vice Mayor O'Brien, members of the subcommittee. Yeah, so on that slide, on slide 10 that you're referring to, the 2,000 trespass warnings are people that we actually physically trespass off that platform. So they are no longer allowed to ride the light rail that particular point.
Okay, so you have trespass warnings versus citations issued. So does a warning mean I'm trespassed and I'm off right then, or am I off for 30 days or 60 days?
So a warning is basically their one-time chance to vacate. If they return, then they'll be issued a citation. So those two dovetail into one another. We give them a warning to leave. We log who they are, and then if they do come back, that's probably associated with the 3,200 number for the citations.
Okay, thank you. Did you have more to add, Mr. Coleman?
Vice Mayor, I was just going to add that we can get that information of the exact number of how many people have been trespassed from the system.
Okay.
And provide that to your office.
Okay, thank you very much. And I don't know if your list of partnerships with the community is exhaustive. If it is, then I would like to add the Metro District Community Collaboration, as they are there at Metro where the light rail ends. And while I do appreciate that from the get-go, the Valley Metro and the Transit Unit and the Police Department have been great partners in making sure that we got it right from the beginning. I just want to make sure we continue that, and those folks are very actively involved, many business folks and residents there. The implementation of new Fair Inspection Security Services contract, when will that be completed?
We do have a TMC RMC meeting today to forward that to the board for February 20th. So once the board approves, that would enact the process.
I apologize. I missed the key word there, security services. You know what, is the implementation of the new FAIR system completely implemented? That's what I was thinking when I read it.
Yes, Councilwoman O'Brien, Chair, members of the subcommittee. Yes, all of the FAIRs have been implemented. We are continue to work with the City of Phoenix on their contract with VIX, who is the actual contractor who's developed the program, which is a flex application that our fare inspectors use on their Android devices. But all fares have been active for quite some time now. We have a variety of fares, Copper Card, Platinum, Mobile Pass, One Rides, and those are all actively out in the system, and the former passes are no longer valid. They're no longer in the system.
And the machine where I go to pay, those have all been upgraded?
Yes, ma'am, they're all installed.
So there is no reason anymore for someone to say on the light rail, I couldn't buy my fare. I mean, generally speaking.
Generally speaking, yes.
Yes, I know occasionally we could have an outage, but we have new machines, things are moving moving well. So I want to say thank you for that. And again, I'm happy to see that we've made improvements. Thank you for coming to the table. When I know when I brought you here all in 2023, it was not necessarily a fun time, but I think we've made some great strides. And additionally, I look forward to this continued partnership. What I would say is, just because it's getting better, let's not take our foot off the gas, because it is important to me that folks are safe. I know we're not perfect and we always need to continue to improve, but you definitely made some great strides. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Councilwoman Guardado and then Councilman Waring.
Thank you, Chair. Just on slide 18, I think it was, slide 18, on the Valley Metro cleaning and maintenance. I just have one recommendation on that, on the pressure washing, each station stop once per week. I think in the areas where we have a lot of more folks that are experiencing homelessness, people that are just the places where we have a lot more issues, I would recommend that we wash those more than just once a week. Just because I know that I've driven in that area and we have schools in that area. We still have kids that are riding the light rail, so we should try as much as we can to keep that area clean. So in those areas, I would recommend that we try to do that more than once a week, just because I think it's important that we try to continue with that maintenance and making it feel more welcoming. I know that area on 19th Avenue and Camelback seems to be a big issue, and we have a couple schools in that area. That's one area that I would recommend. And also Glendale and 19th Avenue also seems to be a big problem. And then over at 19th Avenue and Northern. So I guess that whole 19th Avenue corridor, I would recommend that we do more than once a week if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the input. I do have some good news to report in that the power washing is being moved in-house for that exact reason. We will control the tools, equipment, and personnel, and that can definitely be that's part of the task of the maintenance team, is to do that more frequently. So thank you for the input.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Waring.
Thank you. First, to our esteemed former chair, Ann O'Brien, you said perhaps the light rail hearings we had a couple years ago weren't fun. That just shows it depends on your perspective. So, back to slide 10, the 34,581. So it's kind of, these questions will be about the same, kind of along the same lines of the how many riders did you have and how many assaults. So now I have better frame of reference of what this 34,581 is, and now I'm concerned with the numbers that are below it, not from police perspective, but just what it implies. So 864 fares recovered. That's out of the 34,581, correct? That's the baseline. Okay, so 2.5% of the people you encountered didn't pay their fare. If you have 10 million riders a year, which I think was your number, that means 250,000, probably at minimum, in a given year, are riding for free. How much does that cost taxpayers and other riders who are then subsidizing their rides? I mean, that should be easy math, right? 250 times whatever the fare is. So, and I guess I have to answer now, but I do think maybe reporters would be interested. Wow, we're losing how many thousands, millions, whatever dollars? Food for thought, while we're pondering that one, or you guys are, 2,281 trespass warnings would be 6.6% of the 34,581. Since I assume if you're not paying your fare, but you're on the train, you're trespassing, I'm guessing most of these trespassing warnings were probably at the station where you're just like hanging around. Otherwise, I don't know how to reconcile those numbers. I'm seeing nods. Is that?
Chairman Robinson, Councilman Waring, members of the subcommittee, that is correct. On the platforms or just hanging around.
Awesome. I watched a lot of episodes of the Rockford Files with my dad when I was a kid, and I've learned how to do some detecting. So I'm glad that I was able to figure that one out all on my own. So to Councilwoman Godardo's point, the stations are an issue. Maybe other people made that point, but that's been a point. It sounds like people are just hanging around the stations, don't plan to ride the light rail, or they're going to sneak on and become one of the fares recovered, or the rest of the trespassings. So definitely focusing on the stations to try to prevent that saves taxpayers money. We're not wasting resources policing people who shouldn't have gotten out in the first place. That would probably be job one. I was a little confused. The 3,280 citations. So if every individual, if each one of these was an individual citation, that means 10%. So we send officers in, 10% of the riders are getting a citation of some sort. That seems high. I can only assume maybe some individuals are getting multiple citations at one time. More nodding, but I don't know, is that? Nope, that was a shaking of the head, so now I'm confused.
Chairman Robinson, Councilman Waring, members of the subcommittee. So the citations issued are individual citations to the charges. You can, on one citation, you can issue multiple charges. So the citation is a singular person.
So we send you guys in, Mr. Chair. You're saying 10% of the riders at a given time are citable. You may not be there to see it, but if I'm a rider, that's what I want to know. I mean, I'd want to know that, wow, look to your left, look to your right. You see those 9 other people? Somebody's going to be doing something that would actually get them cited by the police if the police were here to see it. That's how I would interpret that. Am I wrong?
Chairman Robinson, Councilman Waring, members of the subcommittee. So I don't have the breakdown of what citations were issued, whether it would be a trespassing or a code of conduct. I don't know what the initial charge, but that is correct.
So I think you had somewhere in here, so transit unit arrests were in item 8. You had the top 5. Outstanding warrants, trespassing, drug offenses, drug paraphernalia, assaults. Are those the top 5 of the 3,280 citations issued? Or I'm trying to reconcile these two things.
Chairman Robinson, Councilman Waring, members of the subcommittee. So the 1,700 arrests were physical arrests, not citations issued.
So you can be cited but not arrested. Right. What does it, then I guess a different way to say it was, for citations issued, do you have any idea what those top 5 are?
Chairman Robinson, Councilman Waring, members of the subcommittee, I can get that for you at a later date. I can break that down for you.
I appreciate that. The 3,280, does that include the 1,766 arrests?
No, it does not. Okay,
so it's separate. Okay, so, and I'm sorry, they're different. So the 1,766 transit unit arrests are actually for a full year, where the enforcement is specific times throughout the September to September time period that you cited here. So it's not like you would add in to get to 5,000. They're different time periods. How do we know, what are the odds that the person next to me, their behavior is, I'm sorry, so egregious, or they simply don't belong here, and they've caught the attention of law enforcement? How many total, what's the total percentage? What would that be? If you got 34,581 passengers total, is that 10%? You're already cited 10%, so we know it's above that. You don't have to, I don't expect you to know now. But would I go to a ball game where I thought, in my row of 100 people, 15 of them would actually have some interaction with law enforcement during the couple hours I'm here? I wouldn't go. Same with a restaurant, etc. That's a very concerning number. Almost slid by me, but did not, because I'd like to know, is this something I'd ever use with my family? And if I'm interpreting these numbers right, I don't see how it could be misinterpreted. At least 10% you found had an issue. I'd like to know. I guess now I'm just trying to ferret out how serious were these issues. So, and then you had 803 arrests, but the arrests are not a subsection of the citations. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you got to at least add that, so that's 4,000. But the 803 arrests are a subset, I know it's different time periods, of the roughly 1,766 transit arrests. So a lot of the arrests, September 24, so it does seem like you guys must have made, it looks like roughly you might have made half the arrests in the whole system while you were doing this high enforcement with a very limited number of riders, 34,581 out of 10 million. Do you see what I'm saying?
Chairman Robinson, Councilman Waring, members of the subcommittee, I do. And I think a better, maybe we can come back to you at a later date with, we've got two different date ranges. Obviously, we've got the enhanced rail system, which is a different date range than what we're giving you. So maybe we can come back to you and compile all of 2024.
What I'm getting at, though, Mr. Chair, I totally understand. I don't expect you to do the math in your head. I assume you probably don't have the statistics laid out that way. There is a lot of overlap, but there's also, like, depending on how you count it, 3 or 4 months that don't overlap. So you have to sort that out. And I understand that. I didn't expect you to have that answer right now. But it does seem like if we put an officer in every car, arrests wouldn't be for a year 1,766 like they were for 2024. It looks like they would skyrocket, in addition to the citations issued. If this was on a billboard, I don't think people would be like, yay, light rail, let's go ride it. It sounds like we need a lot more security than we have. Again, I am not advocating we take law enforcement from other places. I believe the folks who are patrolling, the officers who are patrolling our streets, they fall under your purview, true, correct? So if we didn't have light rail, these people who are out here doing this could be doing that. We don't have light rail in District 2, so they're out on streets, in buses, in motorcycles, in bicycles, and pedestrians. We'd like to have more people patrolling. Instead, we're doing this and going to 19th Avenue. Not saying we shouldn't do that, but that's frustrating. So I am concerned that maybe we are getting a skewed view of how many arrests we could actually expect out of the 10 million riders if you guys were sitting in every car, because you're not. You don't even have security, private security in every car, not even close. Like that might be for anybody watching at home who's thinking like, yeah, maybe I'll take the kids and we'll go, I don't know. That would definitely be a judgment call. It would also be awesome to have like, are there peak times? Maybe you don't want to be riding the light rail. We should at least have some truth in advertising. We used to, as a city, tell people light rail won't affect your neighborhood, but I think the folks in 19th Avenue might say, you know, that really wasn't true. So that's never good practice and has kind of fed into the undercurrent of I don't trust my government. So I think at least in this case, we have reason to believe things could be, and we should be telling people, hey, these are the best times to ride, et cetera, et cetera. We're not going to, or at least we're not going to have a police officer on every vehicle or security. Because it is amazing that you could make 803 arrests out of 34,581. But for a whole year with 10 million riders, when we didn't have enhanced security, there were only 1,766 arrests. Those two numbers don't make sense unless you think there's a lot of stuff going on that nobody was there to see, except, you know, the passengers. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor O'Brien.
I have one question about the cameras that are at the Thelda William Transit Center. Are they part of our RTOC, the Real-Time Operations Center?
We have been working with Phoenix on whenever they are ready, the cameras are ready for them to have access. So yes, they will be part of the real-time operations center.
Okay. And do we know, Lori or Marcus, when that might happen?
I do not have, sorry about that, Chair, members of the subcommittee, I do not have the exact timeline of when that would happen. I know we came to the full council last year with approval to enter into agreements with Valley Metro and our police department so that we can make sure we can have that agreement in place to make that connection. I will follow back with our police department to understand where we are in making that final infrastructure connection.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So now I have a text message from a reporter who says people are very interested in the subsidy issue. Apparently, maybe that's been requested, or at least there's been some interest in this before. So how many people are riding the light rail for free? I might also add, just to editorialize about the behavior on the light rail. You know, if two people who are conducting a drug deal get in a fight next to me and I have no part of it, but I'm just sitting there, that's an uncomfortable experience too. So they may not report it, police may never know about it, but based on these numbers, given that I'm basing that on the fact that drug offenses and drug paraphernalia and assaults are 3, 4, and 5 in the arrests, I gotta believe there's a lot of that going on that we're not catching. Given that there were 806 arrests, which I assume the top 5 there, why would it be different? Out of 34,581 passengers, well, gee, how many drug offenses, drug paraphernalia, and assaults happened with 10 million passengers? It's a lot. You guys can do the math, I suppose. That's an uncomfortable experience for me too. That's not something I want to be anywhere around either. So again, ferreting out how much of this is going on would be excellent. The cameras could help. It doesn't stop it, but at least, again, truth and narrative, we'd be able to know. So, but I would appreciate the next time I guess we get together, if not before, a number on that subsidy thing, because that's something we should be able to figure out. And people are asking who aren't me. Thank you.
Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you. Just one question out of curiosity, Marcus. The numbers for arrests and citations, are these numbers across the whole system?
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, the numbers, and I'm thinking you're referring to the numbers that Councilman Waring was just speaking to, those numbers are not across the entire system. Those numbers are based upon our activities that took place along our 19th Avenue corridor with our code compliance program. I would say that because of 19th Avenue being a hot spot that we've identified, and that's why we are doing the code enforcement there, that the behaviors that you experience in that corridor are different than the behaviors that we've seen throughout the entire system. And so that's why we're putting into that efforts for that code compliance.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I'll just do one more, if I can. So that speaks to exactly, Mr. Chair, what I was talking about earlier. If we think there's an area of the light rail that's really dodgy, and you're kind of rolling the dice by taking it, more so than any of the rest of the system, we should actually, this is the first I've heard that we're sort of acknowledging that, maybe that's happened. We should be letting people know that. It shouldn't be buyer beware. That's not how we should function. So I think I just heard, yeah, these numbers are skewed because it's so dodgy at that one section. Well, I mean, unless I'm misinterpreting, we should probably be letting people know that. I'd want to know that. I already kind of knew that, but, you know, I had to get elected and get up here to find that out. You know, other people don't have that opportunity or would ever be crazy enough to run for office to find out numbers just like this. So, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the comments.
All right. I have just a couple of real quick questions and a comment. I think the first question, and actually I should know the answer to it, but I don't. The hours of operation for light rail is until 2 a.m. on, Adrian, can you answer that question for me,
Yes,
please?
thank you for the question, members of the committee. The operating hours are anywhere from 3:30 first train pull out to about 2 a.m., 2:30. So we only have about an hour downtime. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Commander Myers, with regard to the transit unit, what are their work hours?
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, our two enforcement shifts, they start at 06 and they secure at 01 in the morning.
Okay, so we have a couple of hours there where some of those concerns. Okay, one of the things we can talk about at a later date is whether or not, and obviously I know you have vacancies in that particular unit, some of the comments that I've received and what we've received in our office about light rail is just that, not seeing police officers or the security personnel from Valley Metro. But either way, I would say that it's a vast improvement over where we were last year. And I think Valley Metro is doing, I thank you guys for your efforts. You've listened to our concerns then. No reason to believe you're not listening to the concerns that we have now. You're really stepping up and meeting those issues head on. With regard to the police department and coverage, I know you've had a change in the leadership there with the lieutenant. I am encouraging that unit to, and I know Leif, you're new in the detail as well, or new in the unit as well. I would encourage you and your folks to get out and talk to these groups that we're talking about up here, because something gets lost in translation. It always does. When you're there, you can answer the questions, you can meet these issues head on. And if they're not, it doesn't get answered, and it just adds to the confusion. But all in all, I do appreciate, this is a great presentation. You guys answered the questions. I know you're gonna put some information together for us. So Lori over there writing, taking notes on the things that we want to see or additional information we want to have. So I do appreciate that. And if there are no additional questions, you guys, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Next, we'll welcome City Prosecutor Jim Sampanis to the table to provide an update from the prosecutor's office, including prosecution of domestic violence cases. Mr. Sampanis, welcome. And as Mr. Sampanis gets ready, I should add, this is something the subcommittee had asked. We wanted some additional information. There's always that anecdotal information out there about the prosecutor's office not prosecuting all the cases that the police department submits to it. So I requested some additional information, and I know Mr. Sampanis was nice enough to put information together that will hopefully answer those questions for us. So Mr. Sampanis, thank you.
Chairman Robinson, members of the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee, I'm Jim Sampanis. I currently serve as City Prosecutor, where it is my distinct honor to serve with a talented prosecutorial team who are dedicated to executing the mission of providing effective and efficient justice for all. This presentation will include three main topics. First, I'll talk about the jurisdiction of the City of Phoenix Prosecutor's Office. Then I'll discuss the mission of the City Prosecutor's Office. And third, we'll talk about charges prosecuted and charges dismissed, and some specific statistics around domestic violence charges. And if time permits, I'll share a recent example with you. Regarding our criminal jurisdiction are misdemeanors that occur in the City of Phoenix. We do not prosecute felonies. All misdemeanor crimes are important, but we have three classes of misdemeanors in our state. Class 1 misdemeanors have a maximum sentence of 6 months in jail and a $2,500 fine plus surcharges. Examples include DUI, shoplifting, and prostitution. We have Class 2 misdemeanors. The maximum there is 4 months in jail and a $750 fine plus surcharge. Examples include most criminal damage charges and reckless driving. We also have Class 3 misdemeanors with a maximum of 1 month in jail and a $500 fine plus surcharge. Examples include most trespassing charges and criminal speeding. To up the degree of difficulty, some crimes, like assault and trespassing, can be either Class 1, 2, or 3 misdemeanors, depending on the particular facts of the case. There are other jurisdictional nuances. But when it comes to our criminal jurisdiction, that's the gist of it. Next, I'll talk to you about the mission of the City of Phoenix Prosecutor's Office. Our mission is simple: to provide effective and efficient justice for all. Although simple, the mission is not easy because of the myriad of factors and their permutations that need to be considered, analyzed, and weighed. To give some context to prosecutorial decision-making, the Arizona Supreme Court directs prosecutors through published opinions. This is the case of State versus Hughes. It says a prosecutor has an obligation to seek justice, not merely a conviction. Prosecutors are also bound by the state bar ethical rules, which describe our roles as ministers of justice, not simply lawyer advocates who advance the interests of a typical client. Speaking of clients, all public lawyers need to know who their client is. For prosecutors, the American Bar Association provides guidance. Prosecutors serve the public good. The prosecutor generally serves the public and not any particular government agency, law enforcement officer or unit, witness, or victim. The ABA also observes that good prosecutors are problem solvers, not merely case processors. The recognition that prosecutors are problem solvers supports our involvement in problem-solving courts, also known as specialty courts, and therapeutic courts, like behavioral health court, veterans court, and community court. Now back to the mission. The mission starts with effective justice, because effectiveness is the essence of what we do. What is effective justice? Effective justice promotes victim safety. It promotes public safety. It promotes safe, livable communities and public spaces. It promotes defendant accountability. It promotes rehabilitation where possible, and it secures convictions for future felonies. Crimes like domestic violence, DUI, shoplifting, and prostitution are what we call predicate priors for felonies. That means if there are a certain number of convictions that were misdemeanors, that next conduct could be felonious. What is efficient justice? Efficient justice is understanding that prosecutorial resources are limited. This includes financial resources and human resources. It avoids unnecessary steps to achieve justice in the case, and it avoids litigation that serves no prosecutorial purpose. Efficient justice is the understanding that our financial resources come from the community that we serve, and we must be good stewards of those funds. We must understand that our resources are the hard-earned dollars of taxpayers. Lastly, what is justice for all? First, it's a promise. It's the promise of equal justice under law, the words that are etched in stone over the United States Supreme Court building. Justice for all is treating everyone with fairness, with dignity and respect, every person, every case, every day. It's understanding the imperfections in our system. It's prosecutorial decisions that are informed by the realities of people's lives, and it's understanding the difference between what a prosecutor can do and what a prosecutor should do. It seeks outcomes that rehabilitate, not debilitate. It's prosecution that is mindful and not formulaic. Justice for all is viewing the system through a societal lens. It means guarding against explicit and implicit biases and unfairly disparate impacts in our community. Justice for all is the social justice piece. This simple mission guides our decision-making and our actions. Now I'll address cases prosecuted and cases dismissed in light of concerns that I have heard. Here are some of the concerns that have been expressed, not just here, but across the country. Frequently expressed concerns. The suspect is arrested, but ends up right back out on the street. Suspect is arrested, but prosecutors dismiss everything. And the system is a revolving door, and data are needed. But like other topics we'll talk about, context is needed. It's fair to describe the criminal justice system as a funnel with a series of increasingly fine filters. This is not a flaw in the system, it is the system. And this is important when you consider two things. First, in the criminal justice system, we're talking about the awesome power of the government to take a person's property in the form of a fine, or their liberty in the form of days in jail, or both. So the stakes are very high. Second is that the criminal justice system is a human endeavor, and no human endeavor is perfect. As you can see from the diagram, the police department is the first filter. Officers face dynamic situations with limited information and limited time to make their decisions. Where possible, officers use their experience, their judgment, their de-escalation skills, persuasive abilities, and their discretion to solve problems on the street before taking enforcement action. For many good reasons, the number of police contacts or even calls for service will always be much larger than the number of arrests made. That's the police filter. The last filter is the court, and that filter is even finer. If a case goes to trial, the defendant is cloaked in a presumption of innocence, which is the strongest presumption in the law. And that presumption is only overcome if the prosecutors produce enough evidence to convince the jury or the judge that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the highest burden of proof in our legal system. Although prosecutors believe in the strength of every case we try, sometimes the neutral fact finder, whether the judge or the jury, disagrees. And that's why we do not have a 100% conviction rate at trial. So the court is the final filter. But I'm not here to talk about other departments or other branches of government. I mention them only to give context to the discussion about our office. Prosecutors review every criminal case. About 20% of our cases we review prior to filing, and the prosecutor is the one that makes the charging decision. The other approximately 80% are charged directly by the police department via a ticket, and we review them as soon as possible and by the same standard as if we were filing it. If there's a factual, legal, or some other defect in the ticket, our main way to remedy the issue is a dismissal with leave to refile the charges. As we discuss this, it's important to understand the relationship between police and prosecutors. We share a common goal of making our community safe and livable, but there are important legal and practical separations between prosecutors and police. In this regard, it's fair to say that police and prosecutors are on the same side, but not on the same team. We're on the same side because we both want the same end result, but we're not on the same team because we don't call their plays and they don't call our plays. But the relationship between police and prosecutors is vitally important. We are criminal justice partners, and prosecutors owe a duty to the police department. Those duties include the duty to meet regularly to discuss issues, the duty to seek understanding of issues facing the community and the police department, the duty to assist with training in areas of expertise, and the duty to provide clear and consistent communication. But to keep the legal and practical separation, there are things that prosecutors must not do. Prosecutors must not give legal advice to the police department or individual officers. The city attorney provides police legal advisors who do that. Prosecutors must not direct criminal investigations, or we would lose our prosecutorial immunity. And we must not surrender our prosecutorial independence. Before we dive into the numbers, I'll briefly explain the different legal standards that apply to police and prosecutors. For police, the arrest decision is based on probable cause from the perspective of a reasonable officer. For prosecution to be charged, for a case to be charged or continued prosecuting, there has to be probable cause from the perspective of a legal professional. And there has to be a reasonable likelihood of conviction. And the prosecution has to be in the interest of justice. These different legal standards and other requirements help explain the prosecutor filter. In addition, although our office is in the business of prosecuting people, we dismiss cases every day for a wide variety of reasons. We have some non-discretionary reasons, cases that are not factually or legally sufficient, or for which there is no reasonable likelihood of conviction with admissible evidence, we're ethically bound to dismiss. But we also dismiss cases for felony prosecution. We might have a ticket that comes in where the officer thought it was a misdemeanor. We look at it and see the elements of a felony are met. So we would dismiss that charge and submit it to the county attorney's office for them to consider. That case or a charge might get dismissed pursuant to a plea to other charges.
Excuse me one second, Mr. Sampantis. There's a question.
Yes.
Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you. Okay, so you just caught my attention when you said it's not a misdemeanor, but it's a felony. So does a person get transferred, or are they released and then somebody else takes the case, or what happens?
That's a good question. There's a lot of cases that happens, and DUI is one. The DUI might come in as a misdemeanor DUI, and might have a license suspension of unknown origin. We'll look at it and review it and find out, oh, they're suspended for another DUI. That case would get dismissed. That person's probably not in custody. If they were in custody, they would be released, and then that would be sent over to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Their jurisdiction is felonies. They will review that, and they may charge it as a felony, or they may return it to us in what's called a decline and say it's okay for us to prosecute it. Same thing with assault charges. Assault may look like a misdemeanor, but if an x-ray comes in and shows a broken bone, now that's aggravated assault. That case would get dismissed, the person likely released and sent over to the county attorney's office for their review.
And why is it, if we know that there is a felony and we know that this person needs to be prosecuted, why is it that we're releasing people? I guess I'm just a little, yeah.
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, Councilmember Guardado. It's part of the bureaucracy that is involved. So we believe that it is a felony, but the county attorney's office still has their discretion as to whether they're going to charge it as a felony or not. So there are situations where a person gets what's called page 2'd, where they're in custody, then they get served with another complaint, but that's mostly happen in felonies. I've not seen it in misdemeanors.
And is there a reason why we don't have a system where if we believe this person should be detained because there's a felony involved, there's no way where that person can just get transferred over? I just think this is where you find a lot of these issues that a lot of our constituents talk about, where they know that, and we have a lot of neighbors that are very involved and are very, and take this very serious, where they see this is where you get the complaints about there's no prosecution, this is not being dealt with, people are committing these crimes, and they're still out on the streets. So there is no system where we can say, okay, we think this is a felony, we need to transfer this person over, and if not, why not? Is it legal reasons? Like, why is it that a system like that doesn't exist now?
Chairman Robinson, council members of the subcommittee, Councilmember Guardado. So the county has a process for that where they will have what's called an in-jail. They have to make the decision within 48 hours to hold somebody on a felony. We don't have that. So first of all, often our case, the person may already be out of custody by the time that we make that decision. But we don't have a process where we can force them to say, you have to review this within 48 hours, and then we hold a case like that. There's danger involved in that, because if somebody pleads guilty to something out of that transaction or occurrence, jeopardy will attach. So, which is one of the reasons we want to dismiss it and get it to the county attorney's office, because if they plead to the charge, which all the elements of a felony are there, also the elements of a misdemeanor, the county attorney's office would not be able to prosecute that in all likelihood.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Other reasons include part of a guilty plea to other charges. Sometimes the county attorney's office is pursuing felony charges out of this arrest. We try to avoid bifurcated prosecution, where they're being prosecuted in 2 different jurisdictions for the same conduct. An exception we make for that are DUIs. DUIs are highly technical, scientifically driven, and we're really good at prosecuting DUIs. The person may be in custody on other charges in other jurisdictions. They may complete the diversion or specialty court requirements, or an essential witness may become unavailable. Sometimes exculpatory or mitigating evidence is received. Because you've specifically asked about domestic violence, I'll provide some data on those. Domestic violence charges are unique. Often it's a crime that occurs in the privacy of the home, a place that's supposed to be a safe haven. And when the perpetrator and the victim are often the only witnesses. And DV cases can be difficult to prosecute because domestic violence victims can be more reluctant to testify than other victims for a variety of reasons. For fiscal year 2023 and through 2024, we had approximately 28,700 cases either directly filed in court by the police or submitted to us to charge. 21% were domestic violence related. Now that's a significant percentage of our total cases, but it's important to remember that Arizona's domestic violence statute is much broader than federal law in terms of the relationship between the parties and the charges that qualify as domestic violence charges. So not every DV charge includes intimate partner violence, which is usually what comes to mind when thinking about domestic violence. I'll give you an example, and it's one that I've unfortunately seen very often. There's an adult drug-addicted grandchild staying at their grandparents' home. But as things deteriorate, the grandparents finally tell the adult grandchild to leave. But the grandchild refuses to leave after being told they're no longer welcome and must leave. That's a domestic violence charge because the grandparent-grandchild relationship satisfies the DV relationship requirement and because trespassing is one of the charges listed in the DV statute. With that said, let's look at the DV charges by type. A majority are assaults at 54%, then criminal damage, and then IJP or OOP. That's interfering with judicial proceedings or violation of an order of protection. Thank you. Now we'll look at the disposition. You see 27% are dismissed. And if you look at the arrow, another 11% were dismissed at the time of trial. This is typically because an essential witness, usually the victim, has failed to appear. In DV cases, our general practice is to give the victim every possible opportunity to appear. We don't dismiss DV cases simply because the victim says they want to, quote, drop the charges, unquote. We don't dismiss DV cases simply because the victim has not made contact with us. We have learned that victims not reaching out to affirmatively make contact with us does not mean they've had no contact from us. We send letters, court date notice, make telephone calls, and sometimes emails. But these victims can be silent victims who sometimes show up to trial even when we've never heard from them. And this general practice of not dismissing DV cases may seem inefficient, but it's a recognition of the realities of the cycle of abuse in domestic violence cases. This diagram shows the cycle of abuse where tensions build, and then the incident happens. That's the crime. Then the reconciliation. I'm so sorry. I'll quit drinking. I'll change. And then a calm, and then tensions build again, and then there can be another incident. We don't automatically dismiss those charges because when the victim is ready, we want to be ready for them. But in addition to cases where the victim appears without ever telling us, there are cases where we will go to trial without them. We've gone to trial and secured convictions in cases where the victim has failed to appear at trial and the prosecutor was able to proceed without them and convict the defendant. In these DV cases, we're willing to sacrifice some efficiency to maximize effectiveness. Now, before I conclude, I do have a recent example I'd like to share with you. It's a man in his early 60s, unhoused, drug addicted, estranged from his family. 6 trespassing charges in 10 months. The police officers who had contact with him were models of professionalism. In addition, they showed human kindness. They gave him information. They gave him resources. They always exercised their discretion in favor of that person and never booked him, although a booking was a legally justifiable means of resolving that. They gave him a CLD, citation in lieu of detention. It's a ticket on his promise to appear. Well, he didn't appear. He ended up with warrants for all 6 of those cases and then jail. He was able to enter our community court, where going through the community court process, he obtained not just his documents, but his sobriety, not just his housing, but family reunification. Defendant graduated, and our office exercised every bit of our prosecutorial discretion in that person's favor and dismissed all 6 cases. I'll leave you with a note that was written by the prosecutor. The prosecutor, after observing this person's transformation, wrote this: "This graduation will always hold a special place in my heart as it marked a profound turning point for the defendant. After years of estrangement from his family due to his struggles with substance abuse, defendant's newfound sobriety and stability have rekindled those vital connections. Witnessing his gratitude was incredibly moving." And this is just one of the recent examples why it's my distinct honor to serve with a talented prosecutorial team who are dedicated to executing the mission of providing effective and efficient justice for all. I'm happy to take any questions, Chairman Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Stampanis. Vice Mayor O'Brien and Councilman Waring.
Thank you so much, Judge, Chairman. I want to just touch briefly on the released part that Councilwoman Guardado talked about, because that was an issue that I brought up some time ago with Lori, and I know we worked through to try to better understand that process. But I think it is important and for us to continue to look at opportunities, or for an opportunity to try to secure that system a little bit more. I don't know if that's through the state legislature or how, but it is concerning, I think, as a member of this community, as the vice mayor, that somebody that we believe has committed a felony, and I understand logically what you're telling me, but I think that there's a problem with the system, and we should try to work on, I'm going to say, closing the loophole a little bit there. So I just wanted to reiterate that. I appreciate you bringing us the stats related to the domestic violence cases. On your slide that talks about your dismissals, there was a 27% decline, and I would imagine that is decline to charge. Could you talk a little bit more about that number?
Absolutely. As I said in previously, 20% of the cases are what are called submittals. That means usually it's the detective who will submit the case to us for a charging decision. Of that 20%, of the whole amount, 20% of those were declines. That means they had come in for potential charges and we declined to prosecute those. Those could be for any number of reasons. It could be factually or legally sufficient. There could be any number of reasons why that would happen.
And so when that happens and it goes back to the detective, do they have the opportunity to potentially work on that case more and resubmit charges, or do we have continuing conversations and partnership to maybe better understand what our detectives need to do so that, that their case would be prosecuted?
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, and Vice Mayor O'Brien. Yes, so there are declines, and that's where we're not going to prosecute this case. But there are also, and I don't know if it's in that number, are what I'll call furthers. A further is a case where it says, hey, we're thank you for submitting this, but we need this other information. Example of that would be criminal damage. Someone might come in with criminal damage, they damage the property of another. That's a misdemeanor charge, but if they damage something at a certain value amount, that could be a felony. So we may say we're going to decline this or further it for more information.
Okay, go ahead.
Also, when we have those discussions, that's part of the communication between the police and the prosecutor's office, and it's part of the clear and consistent communication that we try to provide so they know what's required.
Okay, and you do have further on here at 3%. What I want to understand, though, when you talk about the declines, could a decline be, we've sent it over to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office because we think it's a felony? Does it end up in the decline bucket?
I don't know that we would call that a decline. I can find out that answer for you. So decline generally says no. The detective could always, if they have more information or want us to reconsider, could resubmit it.
Okay, I guess I would like to understand better, what decline means, how many we're sending over to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, where that, where those numbers lie. I think that is important to know. I appreciate this information. Again, as I said earlier, when we were talking about light rail, Lori, I think that as this committee hears on different topics, it's important to include this prosecutor part, whether it is our city prosecutor or our Maricopa County attorney, and understanding the data, because it provides a full picture of what is occurring. I'm pretty sure that every single one of us up here has those conversations with our community members about how it feels like Lady Justice is a little bit more of a revolving door and that folks aren't getting prosecuted. I do appreciate the story about community court. That is what I hoped would occur and will continue to occur, is that our officers know when to exercise, what steps, and that eventually they will seek help. But there are concerns too about folks who don't qualify for community court that need to be held accountable and responsible for their actions and what they're doing to our community. Thank you so much, Chair.
Councilman Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just start by saying I appreciate your job, your role, the work you do. You didn't grimace, but you probably suspect that whenever somebody starts like that, they're about to rip you. So you're smiling, so I will try to pull my punches. You're not the face of the franchise or the face of the problem. I want to make that clear. Please never tell that story about the person getting arrested or not arrested or whatever 6 times. This is how we got Prop 312. So now that exact same behavior, if that person was camped out using drugs, harassing customers and so forth outside of business like that sub shop, they could then sue the city. And what are we going to sue? Say, we didn't let it go on? We didn't prosecute the guy. They had 6 chances and so forth. We're going to lose, and we'll lose tax dollars. Rightfully so. We didn't do our governmental function. So I think a lot of citizens, probably all of them who voted for that, which I think was about 60%, are going to go, what the hell are you guys doing? And they're going to take it to court, and we'll be in trouble. So it's hard for me to see that as a positive. It's great that the person maybe is turning it around. I don't know what the statistics would show about the likelihood of a long-term outcome like that. But you know who's not going to be happy? The person whose business or house or bus stop or whatever, where they had to put up with that 6 times to the point where police were called and then the person was contacted. Because I know our officers aren't just cruising around, oh, I think that guy's just standing in the corner. That's not really the way it's working, unless it's a particularly egregious case. Can you see what I'm saying, Mr. Chair? You don't have to agree. I know I'm up here, so that makes it awkward. But am I wrong somehow? Because if that was my house, I wouldn't appreciate the city's behavior in that instance one little bit. I don't think you would either, and none of the staffers. So maybe we don't have that experience, but somebody did. And I never try to lose sight of that. When everybody talks about letting the prisoners go or whatever, Joe Biden just let out a lot of commuted sentences and so forth. Well, now they're finding out, some of those people did some things that were pretty bad. Well, you know what they're going to be now? Somebody's neighbor. And that's not good, because havoc can ensue. And we don't have enough officers to necessarily prevent it. So I'm sorry to be harsh, but that didn't necessarily sound like success. It sounded like someone who repeatedly violated the rules. It's sad they wound up in the circumstance they're in. But there are 1.7 million Phoenicians, as I've said before, who are trying to live their lives and abide by the rules, some with greater or lesser success. Some are speeding, some are getting DUIs, some are getting in fights in bars, and then some are murdering people or committing heinous crimes. But nobody wants to have to deal with that or have to call the police. That guy's out there again. It's sad you've got your issues. We can't have you acting like that. If I had to sum it up, we just can't have it. So you need to change, or we need to be more proactive. So I don't know, Mr. Chair. I wouldn't go to a Rotary Club and tell that story. I think at least half the audience, and I think more, are going to be like, I don't. They're going to call someone like me, who I'm not trying to hat it, but they're a lot more likely to call me than they are to call you, unless they somehow are related to you or know what you do for a living, or run into a backyard barbecue and you're, no offense, dumb enough to tell them what you do, and then they start talking. I can't avoid that. And there's no explanation I can give that's going to make them happy. How do I know? Because I had those conversations with legislators and business owners who demanded something get put on the ballot because we weren't doing what we're supposed to be doing. A judge told us about this issue down here with the sub shop in that neighborhood. You guys aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I bet what you just said represented a lot of the folks who were down there. Try to get them help, they refused. Try to get them help, gave them a room, they didn't stay, yada, yada. To a certain point, nobody wants to hear it. I am starting to see it in District 2, and I'm not happy about it, as poor Lori Bays, who's sitting there grimacing, knows all too well. I don't like making those calls. I understand that people have their issues. Can't have you acting like you just described. And we certainly shouldn't be aiding and abetting, which is what we're doing by letting it go on. So now, though, the state and voters in the state have taken action. And I am concerned that this exact story, you check me if I'm wrong, you're the lawyer. Laura, you oversee the lawyers. You tell me that we wouldn't be in peril if you were saying exactly the same thing in court. And it is Prop 312, right? I always get the numbers wrong, but I think that's correct. Am I wrong? That's actually a question. The rest was just me sermonizing.
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, and Councilman Waring, prosecution at the misdemeanor level has a chance to be felony prevention officers if we can have some sort of impact. You're absolutely right. As we say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So many times the student is not ready. They're not ready for any of those things. They're not polite and cooperative with the officers. It's a dangerous situation. Those people are prosecuted. But for trespassing, it's a class 3 misdemeanor, so the maximum is 30 days in jail. So from the time of arrest to the time of trial, they would have most likely been released before then because they would have already basically met their final sentence end date. This was a person where they're were being held on bail, being held until they posted bail, and that might have been the impetus to solving the problem. The benefit to the community is that he won't be back. But like you're saying, that's something that we have to always monitor as far as recidivism.
Okay, Mr. I point out a couple things. So it was the 6th time that they were held. I mean, you said I think you said 6 times.
There were 6 charges, and this is my memory from looking at the release order, that all 6 cases were on one release order, so he's being held on all of those cases.
Okay, so
before he decided to enter the program.
Okay. So he had 6 different violations of trespassing, or there were other things. You talked about drugs. I assumed there was some component of that in there.
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, and Councilman Waring, these were all trespassings. There were other people that he was associated with, or at least in area. They'll find someone sleeping on a tarp. They've got a Altoid can full of fentanyl. That person's getting booked on a felony, amongst other things. This person was just being in a spot after he had reasonable notice he shouldn't be there.
So, Mr. Chair, maybe this is a question for Lori. So, or maybe you, I don't know, but so the Prop 312, do we get away with just saying we either couldn't hold them or it was just trespassing? I thought trespassing was the main crux of it. Like, they take a picture, people are just loitering around, they've been doing it for a while. The sub shop would be an example. Or maybe we need an expert to come in here at our next meeting and discuss it further. But I haven't heard anything that tells me this wouldn't be putting us in legal peril if we're not going out and, frankly, getting the person out of there. I would also stay far away from the whole, we solved this problem. Maybe, we'll see. The history of this is recidivism and right back at it and so forth. You also said something, I'm trying to remember the phrase. It was something along the lines of the teacher and the student. We're making it sound like the teacher, or the student has some sort of option. You just get to keep breaking the law. We got these rules. We're not really going to enforce them until you decide you're ready to comply with the rules that, frankly, everybody else has to comply with. The thing on Jefferson, I made that point at the time. If I take my bulk trash and I throw it out on the curb before the 2-week window, the city's going to come and cite me almost immediately. My neighbors are going to complain. But we let people keep garbage out there for, really, I think the first news report was in the Arizona Republic in 1986. So 35 years or 40 years, that's really not acceptable. That double standard is not really acceptable. If a restaurant tells me to leave and I don't leave, they're probably going to call the cops and so forth. But this, we're not going to do anything. I think that's done. Different presidential administration, different Justice Department, different court rulings, some predated the current administration, and I think Prop 312. It shows people are expecting a different level. That whole, when you're ready to change, that That's not an option anymore. You're out there breaking our laws. Trespassing is one, drug, paraphernalia, and so forth. We just had a presentation about the light rail, where that's one of the biggest problems. We banned smoking in restaurants in 2006. So anybody in this room who thought that was a good idea, you banned restaurant. Why? Well, you took away some people's freedom to wreck their lungs, but them wrecking their lungs was kind of ruining the experience of being in public places for everybody else. This is the same thing. We can't have you doing that. And I am just always surprised that that's something that even has to be articulated. But now voters have articulated it. So I guess, Mr. Chair, Lori, I'd like a presentation next time of where, like, what's going to get us in trouble with that Prop 312. Because the city was kind of all at Twitter when that passed, rightfully so. It is directed exactly at us. And I was supportive because of stuff exactly like this. Again, I'm not blaming you. I think hopefully you understand that. Probably doesn't feel great at the moment. But you know, it was your example. So I am trying to also provide, I'm not joking, helpful advice. I wouldn't hold that up to media or Rotary clubs or anything else and say, look what a great job we're doing. I'm not sure people would see that as success. Thank you.
Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you so much. So I have one question for you, well, a couple, but I will start with, I represent the 27th Avenue corridor, where we have a lot of the issues with prostitution and a lot of the drug activity, which is what took us to do the real-time operations centers on 19th Avenue and 27th Avenue. Can you explain to us, because I know people ask this question all the time, when you guys arrest someone for prostitution, like, what's the process that they go through?
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, Councilwoman Guardado, that has been an area of focus for the prosecutor's office. It has been an area of focus of reallocating human resources so that we have a prosecutor who is reviewing all of those cases. It includes, when I just like the slide that talks about the duty that prosecutors have to police, about meetings. We're going to meetings and discussing ideas. We don't give legal advice, but we're definitely aware of it. I visited the real-time operations center myself. I've done ride-alongs myself at night in that area, and we are familiar with it. So your specific question regarding prostitution. So a person is presumed to be innocent unless or until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But if they get booked, then the prosecutor has a chance to look at it and appear. One of the things we're doing is making sure we're doing not just a local criminal history check, but a nationwide criminal history check on that person. The reason is because we want to give the judge the most information that we can. And so not only do we give them that information, we ask for a significant bond amount to hold that person in custody. Sometimes that's granted, sometimes it's not, but that's one of the things that we're doing to make sure it's not that revolving door.
And when you say once that person is booked, what does it take for someone to be booked?
It takes the police to have, Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, and Councilwoman Guardado. So for an officer to book someone, they have, well, for to charge them with a crime, they have to have probable cause. So they'll have probable cause of the crime. Can
you give an example of that? Just like a vague one?
Yes. I don't want to talk about
make one up.
Tactics,
yeah.
Okay, but I'll say manifesting an intent to commit the act of prostitution, right? That's a difficult crime to prove because you're proving what's in somebody's head. But one of the things they'll look at is how is the person dressed? Where are they standing? Are they having contact, waving down other drivers where they would normally not have you would normally not think of that being a safe thing for a person to do. They'd make those observations. They may have contact with the person. They may talk to them. If they get admissions, they may say, okay, you're under arrest for manifesting an intent to commit an act of prostitution. That's the officer saying, I have probable cause to believe that you did that.
Okay, so I guess I'm a little confused then. because some of the reports that we keep hearing and some of the things that we continue to see out there, we continue to see the same people, right? It's not like we have different people on 27th Avenue all the time. It's usually the same group of folks that are out there. And I guess that's my question, like after how many attempts, because from what I continue to hear is that they will arrest someone for prostitution, but then a few days later, they are back at the same corner.
Okay. Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, Councilwoman Guardado, that brings up something that we have talked about during our meetings, and that is asking for travel restrictions. So we not only ask for a bail, but we say if this person posts this bail, that they not go back to this area. So that means that if the person is back in that area, even if they haven't committed any other crime, they can be doing anything there. Their presence there is a violation of their release orders. Their release on that case could get revoked. In addition, they could be charged with another crime. It's called interfering with judicial proceedings. So that's one of the things that we're looking at as far as not just making sure the judge has the information and we get the appropriate bail amount, but that we also get the appropriate travel restrictions.
Okay, because it seems that that's just not happening enough. I think in that area, I think there are moments, where the area gets better and, obviously like this time of year, it gets worse because it's not as hot. But I do think, and this is not more a question for you, but more a question for you, Lori. I just think we just have to figure out how is it that we streamline things a little bit better? Again, I don't know if it's the state. I don't know if it's locally. What can we do? I don't know if it's staffing issues at the same time. How do we get rid of that revolving door? And how can we put something together that's a lot more stricter? Like for example, this idea that someone might be a felon, but they're released. How do we figure that piece out? And then also at the same time, what are the resources that we need that when we're arresting someone for the third, fourth, fifth time for prostitution, how is there a more streamlined process to making sure that that person either gets the services that she needs, right? Like I also believe leading with services as well. And I know that we offer that to folks as well as we're working with them. But then at the same time, how is it that then we are able to prosecute and making sure that we're able to keep people off the streets? We put in a lot of resources, a lot of money into these operation centers, into these areas. And, to continue to hear day in and day out, Betty, this is not working, or this is only getting worse. I just think, I would love for us, not here on the dais, but maybe at a different meeting, just trying to figure out how do we streamline some of these challenges, some of these issues. How do we continue to support the prosecutor's office? What is it that we need to do? And if there are changes that need to be done at a state level, then at least for me to be able to understand that and explain that to our constituents so that they can also help hold other people accountable as we try to continue to work on a lot of these issues. Thank you.
I know you've been up there for a while, Judge, but just a couple real quick questions. When we talk about declining charges, I think one of the things that you didn't hit on, but I think it's that, it's that elephant in the room, basically. How often do we see a police report that does not have the necessary elements that would allow a prosecutor to file charges? Then I know that they have to go back and ask for additional information, but how is that an issue? Is that a problem?
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, it's always an issue because the law is a human endeavor and human beings write police reports. Where we have a situation where something is missing from that police report, and sometimes we further it. Do you have more information? Sometimes there's no way for that information to get back to us. We'll decline it with an explanation that this is what was missing for this particular charge. So that way, each one of those, we don't give legal advice to the police department, but that's practical advice, and they can look at that and say, okay, I see this is why it was declined. We'll make this change, make sure it's reflected in the police report. Sometimes it happened and it wasn't reflected in the police report.
And I asked that question, thank you for the answer, and I asked that question not to embarrass anyone or anything along those lines, but I taught police writing or police report writing for over 7 years when I was with the police department. It's one of the biggest issues back then, and I think it's still true now, that prosecutors are not able to move forward because everything's not in that police report. And again, it is what it is. It's the importance of training, it's the importance of review by a supervisor, whatever it may happen to be. So there are a variety of reasons why cases are declined, and I just think that's important to know that as well. And the last comment I'll make is, I think one of the more powerful tools that a police officer has, and this goes to your story about them helping that individual out, one of the most powerful tools any police officer has is that of discretion. You know, police officers are out there dealing with people with regularity, and I think sometimes they are a good judge. They have a good idea of whether or not somebody could be, and it's not perfect, I recognize that. Sometimes they make a decision to help someone along, and hopefully they have the result that you mentioned earlier. So with that, there's one more question, I think. Go ahead.
The data you were just talking about, you made a comment about we give information back when we dismiss cases, potentially. Not legal advice, but we might say dismissed because something is missing. Is that a fair assessment of what you just shared?
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, Vice Mayor O'Brien. Dismissals, we put the reason for the dismissals, but it's the declines where we say specifically what was missing.
And I apologize. I wrote dismissals and meant declines. So on the declines, you would also put a reason why declines. Do we track that data so that there can be, as Councilwoman, I'm having a rough time.
I know, that's okay.
I'm so
I know
sorry.
what you're talking about.
As the chair was talking about, training, are those documented and tracked?
So Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, and Vice Mayor O'Brien, we do track them to an extent. Our case management system is about to have its 3rd birthday. So going through that first especially year was very difficult, but we are now able to pull more data regarding these stats. And one of our goals is to add specific reasons for either declines or dismissals. We have interest of justice and our talking to the prosecutors to do that, say, you can say interest of justice, but then you have to say an articulable reason why. So that can certainly help. And if it's something that's missing from the police report or a factual element that's missing, that should be there as well. But we don't, I don't think at this point it gets down to that level of granularity, but that's one of our goals.
And so is what you're referring to prosecutorial discretion? Does that fall into the reason? And must you be able to articulate it?
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, Vice Mayor O'Brien, I don't want to mess that up, so I want to be respectful.
Absolutely.
Prosecutors always have discretion, right? So there are cases that may be factually or legally sufficient that we end up dismissing for reasons that we had talked about, persons in prison, things like that, where you can't prosecute a case. Those are things that we are able to do and use our discretion, but also part of that clear and consistent communication is giving a rationale for it.
Okay, and then I'm gonna ask 2 questions. How many Class 3 misdemeanors of the same issue, because you brought us a very specific example today, can someone have until it becomes either a higher misdemeanor or is it considered a felony? And how many times can someone continue to break the law before you would say, we are prosecuting, right? You gave an example of 6 CLDs? No, yes, CLDs for the gentleman you talked about.
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, Vice Mayor O'Brien, a ticket, a CLD, is a lawsuit. So that is enforcement action that's taken by the police officers. When it comes to Class 3 misdemeanors, there are none that get you to a felony. The only ones that do that would be the DUI I talked about, domestic violence crimes, or prostitution, or shoplifting. Those are the only crimes. But as far as the number of Class 3 trespassings, that can just add up. The only thing that we could do is argue that those 30-day maximum sentences could be consecutive. So most of the time, the presumption is that the jail time is concurrent. It can be a problem that's so bad that we're saying, Judge, this is 30 days, but I want the other 30 days on top of that. So that is a possibility, but that depends on the facts, and it would require a number of prior convictions for that offense.
So to Councilman Waring's point, the concern could be that I could continue to rack up, for lack of a better term, CLDs in that Class 3 misdemeanor, and potentially never be held accountable.
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, and Vice Mayor O'Brien, I would disagree with that in that once you get the citation in lieu of detention, you have a court date you have to show up to, and it's your promise to appear. If you do not appear at that court date, which is the arraignment, the judge is going to issue a warrant for your arrest. And that means that you don't have an option of coming in. When police have contact with you, they're going to execute that warrant and they're going to take you to jail. And that's 10 to 15 days around there.
Okay, thank you so much. Chair, I would request that we get information around how many CLDs we have issued, how many warrants, how many folks are appearing, how many warrants are outstanding in that area.
I see Lori writing that down, so I think it's taken care of.
Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Hampanis, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, thank you.
Okay. And I know we're running long, but item number 4 is a quarterly update on the police department's hiring, recruitment, and attrition. We'll welcome Commander William Joe and Commander Sarah Garza to the table. Commanders, welcome.
It's good afternoon now. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee. Today I'm joined by my partner, Commander Sarah Garza, and together we'll be presenting the department's hiring, recruitment, attrition, and an update on our academy and FTO programs. As always, before we begin, I want to thank our partners in Human Resources and Budget and Research who assisted in compiling the data to support this presentation. So today we are proud to report our 2024 year-end hiring statistics and follow up on questions the committee had for us in the November meeting. Those topics include recruit attrition from the academy and field training, along with an analysis into where applicants are leaving our hiring process. So as of January 1, 2025, the department was staffed at 2,506 officers with a hiring target of 3,125. In 2024, we received 3,027 applications. This was in comparison to 2,571 applications in 2023. We also hired 167 recruits, laterals, and reinstatements. And based on those numbers, we hired 5.5% of all the applicants that applied to us in 2024. Here we can see our total applications have significantly increased in 2024 compared to 2023. As we reported in the November subcommittee meeting, we instituted new procedural changes to our application process in August of 2024. This included several tracking mechanisms to expedite follow-up phone calls to applicants who showed interest in our recruiting events, and most importantly, changing the steps in our application process. Now, if you'll remember, we used to ask applicants to fill out an application with the state at the AZ Post website. This was confusing to many applicants who only applied to the state, and then they never completed the second step, which was apply with us at the city. In August, we officially stopped asking them to start the application process with the state and asked them to directly apply at joinphxpd.com. This allowed us to immediately capture their information and start communicating with them to encourage them through the process. As you can see from the graph, the improvements have been so impactful that we ended December 2024 with our highest monthly total of 450 applications for that month. And then we've hovered in the past around 250 per month for most of 2023 and the beginning of 2024. What's most encouraging is that as of today, we just received new data that for January, we received 571 applications. And December, January, the holidays have traditionally been low points in our application process. In 2024, we ended the year hiring 159 new recruits and 8 lateral officers for a total of 167 hires. Here we can see academy class sizes in 2024 and our most recent class slated for 2025. And there's a consistent trend upwards. We believe we're starting to see the results of numerous process improvements evidenced in our academy class sizes. 2024 saw a consistent upward trend in the green line. This is in contrast to 2023, where we saw dramatic dips and valleys. We believe that our process improvements have streamlined our hiring practices, so the level upward trend is evidence of our more organized and methodical approach to processing applicants through the process. We believe that going into 2025, we will continue to see the steady increase and avoid the dips and valleys of the years past. With the close of 2024, we saw 204 total officers separate from the department. We saw the largest number of officers leaving the department in 2019 through 2022, but have seen the past 2 years level off. I gave an update in November addressing the committee's question of why and when officers are retiring. Here I can give you a complete year-end total for 2024. In 2024, 204 officers separated from the department. The majority of them were from early drop, and retirement. However, 85 officers represented in the pink left prior to 20 years of service. This graph further illustrates that officers with over 20 years make up the majority of the separations each year. In 2024, 55 officers with 20 to 25 years of service retired, and 47 officers with 26 plus years of service retired. 23 officers with 1 to 5 years of service separated from the department, while 28 officers with 6 to 20 years of service separated from the department. This shows that out of the 204 total officers that retired in 2024, 102 were officers with over 20 years of service. So with the help of the team at the Budget and Research Group, we can look at the projected effects of retirements on our total sworn population. Graphically, we can see that there is a point here in 2026 where hiring should catch up and hopefully overtake attrition. To further explain that last graph and then the next couple slides, the city's budget and research team produces a monthly authorized report that projects the department's future based on historical attrition, known drop retirements, the department meeting its hiring goal of 35 new officers every 2 months. So based on those historical parameters and our hiring goal, Budget and Research projected a total filled count of 2,603 officers in December of 2027. That would be a net gain of 103 officers compared to January 1 of 2025. So to speak on our academy and FTO programs and attrition through there, Sarah will have the next few slides.
And before we get into that, Councilman Waring.
Thank you. I appreciate your efforts. I mean, it sounds like maybe long-term things might marginally improve, but when was the last time we were as low as 2,506 officers?
Chairman
I'm not talking 2 days ago. I mean, like, historically.
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, Councilman Waring, I believe, and I don't have the actual dates or the actual years, it predates my time with the department, but I do believe it was in the 90s.
So we're now at 1990 levels of staffing. I moved here in 1991. The entire state was 3.5 million people. Now it's 7 million. Phoenix is growing rapidly. It's 1.7 million. I got to believe we had less than 1 million people. So per capita, number of officers per capita for Phoenicians has plummeted since the 1990s. So I appreciate that we're trying to put a positive spin on things, but there is no way to tell the public that they're better off with fewer officers. I know some in this room might want to defund police. Say it all you want. There is no way to dispute that means fewer officers out patrolling our streets, fewer officers responding to calls of guns in schools, which we get all the time, because you guys send me the texts, not to mention murders, everything else, break-ins. Just fewer officers respond. And we're budgeted for, Lori, 3,125. So if we could find 619, I think my math is right there, officers today, we could hire them because we budgeted for it, but we've made it such an unattractive job with public statements and everything else. Now here we are. That's really frustrating. And as someone who actually lives in Phoenix themselves, I don't appreciate it. This isn't a referendum on you guys. I think you understand that. So it's very frustrating that we're now at 1990 levels of staffing. And we wonder why the light rail, in our previous discussion at today's meeting, a little dodgy. We could put a lot more officers out there. We used to have, well over 100, I think, motor vehicle officers. Now it's 34. At least that was the last number I heard, I think. Makes it less safe. You take your kids to school, you go to the grocery store, whatever, you're just less safe. So for those who thought defunding police was a fantastic idea, and to the Justice Department that picked out like 32 cases out of a few million human contacts over the last 8 or 9 years, well done. But as a citizen myself, and on behalf of my family, I don't appreciate it, not even one little bit. I appreciate the jobs that you guys are doing to try to correct this ridiculous, self-inflicted stupidity. Thank you.
Commander Garza.
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, good afternoon. I'm here to present our academy and field training retention numbers. At the Phoenix Police Academy, we have one of the highest retention rates in the state. There are 17 academies throughout the state. AZ Post reports that the average academy attrition is at 30%, and that several academies are even at 50%. So you'll see our percentages here. 80% retained, 73% retained, 75% retained are above those numbers, and we're very proud of that. We attribute a lot of this to the quality recruits that we're hiring with Commander Joe's team, the elite level training that they receive, and our PC and wellness measures that are in place. Some of the reasons that people are leaving largely out of the academy are personal reasons. A second is if they're sick or injured. If they miss a certain amount of time in the academy, they need to be re-enrolled or dismissed. We choose to re-enroll several of them in the next available academy so that they will show up again and give them another chance. Another reason that they leave the academy are academics. The Phoenix Police Academy is akin to a community college at times. We actually have several universities that give several hours of credits towards bachelor degrees due to the level of curriculum that they're receiving in the academy. Let me switch it. I'd next like to talk about the retention of officers in the FTO program, the Field Training Officer Program. You'll see that our retention numbers are 80%, 77%, 75% over the last 3 years. These are also very high rates, we believe, because our new officers are prepared when they go to this next level of training. As with the academy, we continuously evaluate our FTO program. The FTO committee meets bi-monthly to ensure quality training and identify training deficiencies. We even evaluate each precinct for FTO attrition individually to see if there is a problem with a precinct, a squad, or even an individual FTO. So we are looking at it on several different levels to make sure that we have consistent training. Some of the top reasons that people are not retained during FTO are their performances are below standard evaluation guidelines, the reality of the job, and personal issues. These are the total numbers from the last 2 slides that I just presented. One big takeaway that we have here is our conversion of those who don't stay as sworn officers into critical roles as professional staff within our department. And then I would like to add that Today, we were very happy to report that we have 100 recruits on campus. It's the first time we've seen triple digits of recruits, and it's encouraging to see positive progress in that area. It's Councilman Robinson, members of the subcommittee. It's 4 classes. We have 1 on campus that's in pre-academy right now. Yes.
So to further extrapolate more detail on the last few slides that Sarah presented, of the recruits from 2022 that left the position of officer, the department successfully retained those recruits in professional staff roles. And here we can see where we've been able to retain them. 2 were as 911 operators, 7 as detention officers, 1 as police assistant, and 2 as crime scene specialists. And what we'd like to say that's important about these roles is that they stayed and remained with us in the police department. And the mission from my team is to go forth and continue to encourage them, if at some point they want to return to the role of police recruit, that they are able to do so much more efficiently and quickly, being that we were able to retain them within our department. Here we can see that in the 2023 recruits, of the ones that left, 1 was an admin aide, 11 again as a detention officer, 1 as a human resources aide, and 1 police assistant, 1 911 communications operator. So while we're proud of the advancements we've made in 2024, to recap, we have seen our applications rates skyrocket at the end of the year. We have seen a stabilization and steady rise in our academy class sizes, and most importantly, based on current projections, if our academy classes continue to rise, our total sworn population should see positive growth to 2027. Going forward, we'll continue to develop strategies to increase our hiring rate and decrease attrition from the department. We've already begun several projects where we're beginning to integrate our community action officers and community engagement units with our recruiting teams. This will allow us to quickly multiply the manpower to help manage the large influx of applications, to make sure we are communicating quickly with applicants, to encourage them along through our application process. The new larger team of CAOs, community engagement, and recruiting officers will also begin working with our fire partners this year. We've already worked with them to identify a date for our first public safety career fair, where units from both police and fire will be sharing what their specialty details do. This will be a job fair combined with a community event element, where public safety education about both departments and seeing interesting displays and learning interesting facts will assist our recruiting teams in encouraging interested community members to apply for jobs within the city. We hope that this type of community event combined with our will have a long-lasting impact on our community and generate interest in employment with us. That concludes our presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Mayor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing the information before us today. I too have concerns about where we are today. When we were at 2781 in October or November of 2021, based on a report I was looking at. And so to be at the 2,500 mark is incredibly troublesome. I'm happy to see the applicant numbers jumping. A number I'd like to know is how many of our applicants make it past the AZ Post qualification, right? Because once we screen them, then they apply it, they have to go to AZ Post, is that correct?
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, Vice Mayor O'Brien. So as Chairman Robinson knows from his time with the AZ Post, it's a varying type of application process. So at any time, we can consult with Arizona Post regarding an applicant, but the way that traditionally works is an applicant applies to us, we receive their application, we begin their background process, we encourage them to then do the personal history statement that they must submit to AZ Post. Mm-hmm. Throughout the process, depending on how the interviews go or anything, if new information is gleaned from the applicant, we can consult with AZ Post and say, is this something that would keep them from becoming a certified peace officer? Okay. But at the very end of the application process, We submit a packet of who we believe is the best candidate for the job to AZ Post to then certify them for a position as a peace officer.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I still would like to know those numbers where AZ Post is saying it's not possible for them to move forward. The projected effect of retirements, because I asked for where will we be in December of 2027, and the formula that was provided here on slide 13 talks about 35 new hires every 2 months. Is that the number that was used in the projection to show that we would be at 2,603 sworn in December of 2027?
Chairman Robinson, members of Subcommittee, Vice Mayor O'Brien, yes, when we use 35, that is the goal of the unit, goal of the department, and we use that as the goal to show the goal, the projected goal. So that number is a goal that we're shooting for, yes.
Okay,
correct.
so, and thank you. I guess that word goal is important here. I would put that in this slide because projected goal is different than what we project will be true and accurate, because if I go off of the percentages that Commander Garza provided relative to us being retaining from 22, 23, and 24, that average is about 67%. So we won't be anywhere close to 2,603 if our retention stays as it has for the last 3 years. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm trying to understand and we can of course adjust it, right? It's a projection for right now, but I want a projection of reality as well as our goal. Those can be two separate numbers, but it's not fair to, I think, say to the community, we believe we'll be at 2,603 when we don't have the data that says we're retaining folks. We've made great strides from when I came on because we were, we're still going down, but our academy numbers are climbing. Our application numbers are climbing. And for that, I am very, very grateful. But we have a lot of work to do. And the reason I want to know these projection numbers is I want to know the plan for when we hit these certain numbers, whether it's 2,500, if we're going to hit 2,400 somewhere in the next year, hopefully we won't, but we need to be prepared for that. So what does that mean to our patrol officers, to our folks who are in specialty units? How will we be answering the calls from everyday citizens when our numbers are not going the right direction? And I am still concerned about the atmosphere, and because, as you pointed out in your separation slide, we still have a lot of folks who are leaving before they're through with drop, or even they don't even give drop a chance, and that's a lot of money being left on the table. So we need to continue to work on our culture as well. Again, I'm grateful for the positive strides we're making, but I would like to see the adjustments to the numbers or the additions to the numbers so that we can have a realistic view and actually have a plan in place to say how patrol will be impacted. Thank you.
I just had a couple real quick questions. If we can go to slide number 4 real quick, where we say we hired 5.5% of all applicants in 2024. What's the biggest, I mean, I know it's tough to become a Phoenix police officer. It's tough to become a police officer in the state of Arizona, period. And as was mentioned, I sit on the Arizona Post Board. It's an integrity board. So we look at things and we tell agencies, no, you cannot hire that person with regularity. But what are we seeing, and it's anecdotal, and if you don't have it now, it's something we can talk about at another time. Are we seeing why? I mean, what's the why? Why not 10% of the 3,027 applicants that were submitted? I mean, what's the biggest reason we're not hiring more from your perspective?
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, When we look at the overall totality of why someone doesn't make it through our process, overwhelmingly, it's certain standards that we have to adhere to. And when we adhere to those standards, we try and remain fair and impartial regardless of who the applicant is or their backgrounds. And the majority of the time when someone doesn't make it through the process, it is because of the standards that are being held to them.
And I get that, but I'm asking specifically, which standard? Is it, what's the biggest disqualifier for someone these days? Is it, if it's me coming through, is it because I'm, whatever it happens to be, but do we know what the biggest reason is?
Yeah, so Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, it surprised me, but mostly it's the adherence to the AZ Post standards. At the City of Phoenix, at the Phoenix Police Department, we adhere we adhere to the AZ Post standards, and if someone doesn't make it through our hiring process, more likely than not, and I believe it was across the board, I have the numbers, it was 13% was due to certain disqualifiers from an AZ Post standards perspective.
And I understand that, and I know what those disqualifiers are. I'm just trying to figure out, okay, and I guess what you're saying is the reasons we on Arizona Post say you can't hire or we won't this person be certified in the state of Arizona are the biggest reasons you're seeing. And usually it's a great deal of drug use. If I remember correctly, it's drug use and sometimes some non-disclosed or undisclosed arrests. Is that pretty much what we're seeing? Somebody's been in trouble before, or they've used a lot more drugs than they've admitted to?
Councilman Robinson, Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, to go into that much granular detail, I would have to go back and look at it, and we are working on that right now. That's a direction that we've been given is, hey, we need to look into specifically, is it drug use? Is it personal history? Is it what is it about the individual AZ Post standards that are causing people to be disqualified? Right now, it's a broad stroke, and I wouldn't be able to tell you in detail if it's specifically drugs that's causing. But as you know, I have gone before you and the AZ Post board before to do waivers for, and so anyone that is qualified but has drug use in their history, we are going in front of the board to get waivers for them to petition so that they can move on in the process.
And just so it's understood, within reason.
Within reason.
Not just anybody,
Absolutely.
yeah. And that's greatly appreciated. I think the point I wanted to make is Phoenix Police Department, its standards are pretty strict. They're right there. If it's somebody that could use some help in a certain area, let's say it's me coming through and I can't run that 1.5 miles like I used to in under 7 minutes, and don't anyone laugh over there. But if that's, if it's something like that, are we working with folks to try to get them over those barriers? I think that's what I was getting at more than anything else.
So Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, actually, you brought up a great point because I'm encouraged to tell you that we actually have a 0.1% failure rate in physical standards. And I think that's largely in part because of our recruiting team's constant communication, coaching of the applicants. When we do identify the individuals that can't make the physical standards, we're having them come to our SWEP program, which is our workout program. But also, I think I mentioned, and I didn't go into granular detail about it, but the communication aspect that I was talking to you about, when we see applicants that are having struggles going through the application process, whether it's filling out the applications, showing up to an appointment, that's again that communication piece where our recruiters and our background investigators are constantly reaching out now. We've made a concerted effort where if we hadn't heard from an applicant in the past, we were moving so quickly that we may have left quite a few behind. We now have 2 people dedicated consistently to go through our records to see, hey, this person hasn't communicated with us in over a month. Let's recontact them, see what's going on. And what we found is we've had good success rate in finding people in the process that I just got stumped by this question and I stopped filling it out and I need to revisit it. And then we walked them through that. And I don't know if you guys had the opportunity to see it, but Ryan Cody and the public information officers teams, we've been starting to use technology to do this where we've done 2 Instagram lives now where we live answer questions for applicants. So we've had numerous, we had over 100 of them on the last one, where they're actively chatting with Ryan as he's talking to them and answering their questions. And Ryan will call them out by their screen name. Jojo5, I see that you have a question about, hey, this application process, how I'm hung up on it, where can I get help on that? And he'll answer them directly live. And we're going to continue to do those, not only for sworn positions, but for professional staff as well.
Okay, and I thank you for that, and that you're going in the right direction. And you'd also mentioned, and it was on slide number 5, I think. Yeah, slide 5. You said you now have immediate contact, which is critical, and it is. I think I know I had mentioned to Lori on more than one occasion, I have students at ASU getting ready to graduate, and they're going to go to that first law enforcement agency that calls them back. So I really appreciate you jumping on that. That is critical. All the work that you guys have done leading up to this, it's all moving in the right direction. Commander Garza, I've been to a few of your academy graduations. I'm really appreciating what we're seeing. I think what's going to be the key, and we need to keep a close eye on this, Lori, is those folks who go into the FTO, Field Training Officer Program, and progress from there. Once you make it through FTO, it should be a done deal. It really should be. We shouldn't lose anyone beyond FTO, and I think we need to pay particular attention to who our FTOs are, how they're training folks, treating them fairly and appropriately, and those types of things, and moving forward. Because I think that's how we build on the numbers that we have and continue to move forward. So with that, thank you very much. And I know we have one comment on this particular item. Annie Ender, if you could make your way to the podium. But Commanders Joe and Garza, thank you very much.
Good morning, afternoon, committee chairman Robinson and committee members. I'm not going to have to say much because I appreciate the comments that the vice mayor has just made and that you've made. I just have a couple of questions that I will leave. This is really good, and it looks like we are going in the right direction, but I'd kind of like to know why that presentation was different than what the public received, because all of my comments are going to be based on what is in here. So just to reiterate a couple things that have been said, and I said this last meeting, we've lost 40% of our new hires from 2022 to 2024. That's still really not explained. Also, what was confusing in this report, on page 36, it showed where the recruits are now, and it showed that we had one that died in 2022. No, we didn't have any officers that I know of that died in 2022, so there's some discrepancies there. Sadly, we have, when you go through the analysis in here of who, whether it's the gender, what gender is in what position, we have 6 commanders shown. But from what I understand, over 3 of them have employment suits against the department, which is very troublesome. 2 of them have been made public. Also, in the analysis, when you look at the projections that have been put out there, I know the state uses this, was 2,331 from the report I've seen, and you're showing 2,547. I'm really saying this because it seems disingenuous. I'm sorry. I want my police department to be healthy, and I've spent 3 years trying to support the morale, but this works against me. Last one, okay. Don't ask me. Don't believe me. You've got a survey out there that shows that over 85% are unhappy.
Okay, items 5, 6, and 7 are for information only. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Councilman Waring.
Yes. Thank you. So I appreciated the department getting me some information I requested. Apparently it did exist after all. I also think I had asked you to share stuff with news media. So my first question is, did you do that? and I'm trying to move us along. I apologize for speaking fast, but these guys all have to go to lunch. I'm happy to sit here all day and listen to the pearls of wisdom, but we can't all pick our colleagues. Just kidding, guys, just kidding.
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, Councilman Waring, no, we have not addressed the media comments yet.
Okay. I mean, it's been a month, right? I mean, it just seemed like it was a specific request. I'm disappointed to hear that. All right, so I did, Chief, I think you were out of town or whatever, so Lori Bays responded. I did have some questions about why we had so many less calls for service in District 2 than other parts of the city. So that data was on page 52. Or, excuse me, 55. So in my notes, altered state of consciousness. Any suggestions as to why District 2 would have 1,284, District 7 would have 2,083, and District 8 would have 2,964. Now, I guess, based on Lori's answer, that isn't drugs, but what is it? That's a difference of 1,700 calls for service between District 2 and District 8, and about 800 between District 7 and District 2.
Chairman
I mean, that's a tremendous difference. There's got to be some explanation.
Chairman Robinson, Councilman Waring, members of the subcommittee, we're looking into those differences, and to your point, you are correct. Altered level of consciousness type call is not necessarily drug use. There can be lots of reasons that a patient's level of consciousness is altered, and we are working with the county, and we've formed a group, we have that in the report here too, to have a better understanding of why certain council districts specifically have more activity levels than others. And those other questions that you had, it will take us some time to get an understanding of that, though, sir.
Again, the response times might look much different if we could rotate resources to District 2, because you were getting, just on this one thing, 1,700 fewer calls for service in District 8 than District 2. Something's going on there, and it might not be a fire department issue. It might be an issue that some other government agency or something could address, but until we have a better understanding of what that is, hard to say. Difficulty breathing, 1,115 in District 2, 3,305 in District 8, 2,724 in District 7. Triple? Same population size, it's the same number of people, almost exactly, at least it was a year or so ago. Any thoughts? I mean...
Chairman Robinson, Councilman Waring, as you've correctly illustrated, that the council district's population is balanced there, but the call volume is not. So it will take us some time to understand it. As you've said previously and indicated in this report, that some council districts have a whole lot more calls than others. And the calls do vary, as you pointed out. Yes, sir.
Not trying to belabor it. Injuries, 484 in District 2, 1,861 in District 8, 1,513 in District 7. 3.5 times? Same number of, I mean, how many household accidents, like what would constitute an injury? I'm just trying to understand, and I'm hoping that if nothing else, you could get some anecdotal information from your firefighters. So I have met with the union representatives since then, and maybe you could talk to them. We kind of briefly discussed this. That wasn't the only point of the meeting. ODs. So it wasn't even in the top 10 in District 2 or District 8. So it's, since I don't have that data, I can't say, but there's 1,043 in District 7, which must be dramatically more than District 2, because number 10 in District 2 is actually, I think, car accidents. It's only 458, so it's at least double District 2. And District 8, District 8, the lowest thing was 1,244, so they could theoretically have the same number of ODs. Twice the ODs, but that's actually not as dramatic as we might possibly have expected, was speculated about at the last meeting by some people. The top 3 were these others. Unconscious. Again, District 2 and District 7, it's not even in the top 10, but there were 1,244 in District 8. What produces unconsciousness? I mean, besides drugs or alcohol, and I guess those are different categories, so I guess it's not that. Again, it would be helpful to know. Car accidents. This is one that everybody can understand. There are 458 in District 2. There were 1,422 in District 7 and 1,411 in District 8, so 1,000 more car accidents in each of those. There's not much you can do about that. As a firefighter, obviously you have to respond, obviously car accident. But I mean, why would streets be so dramatically more dangerous downtown than in District 2? Where actually I might have expected the opposite, since there's more wide open spaces, people might go more extreme speeds. So those are things I would hope you dig into deeper. It sounds like you're still planning to. On the, and it came up before, on the, and I do appreciate that you're sending more stuff, for lack of a technical term, to District 2. And it does look like it's having some impact. So the R45 and R49, those statistics would just be a small component, or would it be a component of all? Because it doesn't really give me a time frame, I don't believe, in page 52, which is the overall response times in District 2. So theoretically, as time goes on and response times with R45 and R49 go down, that should drag down, at least to some extent, the call time, response times in District 2 as a whole. Correct about that, right? But you only had this for 2 months of data. I think that's what it says here, right? Okay. Anne's correcting me and says 3. She's like that. I can't help it, fellas. I was willing to accept your 2, but that's fine. So you're going to keep us posted, I hope month by month. I assume it looks like you keep this monthly. I'm sorry, you're raising your hand.
Thank
It's
you.
not a classroom, but I appreciate that.
No,
yeah.
I appreciate this very much. There is a ton of data here, and it's extremely, extremely important stuff, and I'm so thankful for this committee with your support
Making you
and
do
your
it?
questions.
Yeah, well.
And no, seriously, I seriously am. This is very important stuff. The rescues, as we said in the last briefing, we knew that we needed to bring our rescue times down in District 2. We made those changes with those rescues. The data that's in this report is representative of those areas where those rescues cover in the community, and that is really encouraging data. And we did ask our tech team while we were sitting here, because I heard the community comment. I was like, I wonder what our CON response times just for the month of January were in District 2, and they reported back 1054. So that's just for January. It's not for the whole year, and those numbers will play out. But that trend line is it's good news to report. So if you get the question, what happened in January with ambulance response times 90th percentile in District 2, the report back is 1054 for the whole of District 2. And the impacts of Rescue 45 and 49 are in here, and you have those scores there.
Mr. Chair, so the same as I had for our prosecutor earlier, if you were here for that fun discourse, I would be careful talking about good news. I might imply that it's a good trend. So if I live in District 2, okay, response times dropped 6 seconds in 2024. Should drop more, right, with the R45 and R49 in 2025. But until we get a grip on why, because we also have, so I figured, well, maybe we're having a lot more big events where all the firefighters have to go to some major accident. Honestly, in my head, I was thinking, well, okay, I've seen them, bad accidents, people drive really fast. We have more wide open spaces where there's no housing, and then there's housing, and then there's none. People are racing through, they're going 70 and a 40. I thought, well, okay, maybe they're rushing off to big accidents, but we actually have fewer like major incidences too. I didn't write that statistic down, but that wasn't the case either. So, because that would be an explanation. You guys are all tied up doing something else on a more regular basis, but that wasn't factual. For the rescue response times, again, it's been dropping for the last 4 years. So that's good news, but it's still the worst in the city. That's not good news. Nobody's gonna be like, that's great. So I appreciate that you guys are trying. I think you always know that. I appreciate this information, but I would be cautious in saying, hey, this is great. You can say we're moving in the right direction, and that's true. And we did some things to move it further in the right direction. Can't address the things that have happened in the past, but we're working on it now. I always have to add in, you know, with Elda Williams and I making an issue of it, you did put in a whole fire station in my district in 2015 or thereabouts in a year and a half, which was a heavy lift. That brings me back to last thing, because I do know, kidding aside, people want to get going, but this is an important issue, obviously to me, for sure, I'm sure to everybody up here. On page 57, you know, when I said to Lori, you know, I see a lot of good reasons why the new fire stations should have been in District 2, or certainly at least, you know, one of them, but I never really saw the reason why they weren't picked. I almost felt like I was missing a page or something. Maybe I just didn't see it, I missed it. It did seem like there was some talk, but we have the higher volume in other parts of the city. I understand about the higher volume in the parts of the city, but we really are shortchanging the people by moving resources, just like the light rail discussion. If you're putting police officers on light rail, and that was actually a city-created problem, so that's even more frustrating, you got to take them from somewhere. And while your guys' hiring has been different than police, the police, we've also been doing that at a time when we've had a difficulty attracting officers. With you, we're having a difficulty attracting applicants, but we're still getting enough qualified applicants to fill the positions. I think you're nodding, so I think that's a fair characterization of what we're seeing. It's been a dramatic drop in applicants, but you had so many applicants 10 years ago that you lost half or 2/3. You still have enough qualified people who can get through the drug test and do the physical and want to be firefighters and want to work for Phoenix. You're filling the spots. That's not necessarily always going to be the case, but right now it is. So we actually have the firefighters we could send. We're just choosing to send them somewhere else. That's a different discussion than police, where they're like, we got to go where the crime is, you know, and we have a shortage of people. We haven't even filled even close to our spots. So I expected a more robust discussion of, you know, again, I voted against the bond chief. We had that discussion in part because we weren't putting a fire station where I thought it was badly needed, and I just thought as a representative, hence the word, of the people in District 2, I felt like, you know, that wouldn't have been serving their purposes, or maybe their wishes, even if they didn't totally process this process. So when could we expect, like what's the earliest we could get a new fire station to address these issues? I know we got R45 and R49, but we need more. I don't think that's going to solve the problem. It might help. It'll move some of these numbers closer to what the rest of the city experiences. Is there a time?
Councilman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, Councilman Waring. Right now, the current process for us is fire stations are being built within the bond process, which those first 4 stations which we've identified. So as we move on in continuous bond processes, we would identify where those needs are. And so in the current process, that is what we would allow us to build new infrastructure within our system.
So, Mr. Chair, so I obviously knew the answer. I wanted to hear you say it so people here watching at home, whatever, could understand. So that's all predicated on some vote in the future. I'll be gone by the time that process is in flux. Somebody getting a station inserted that's going to be in District 2, and then it being voted on, and then the funding come in, and then however long it takes to actually build the station. It's a long way of saying it's going to be a long time. So, you know, that's frustrating, but I just feel like people should know that that's the current situation. Again, do appreciate the one that was built kind of out of nowhere a few years ago. Appreciate you moving resources up there. It's hard to explain these numbers, there's no doubt about it. But we should at least, if media ask or whatever, explain the situation. I'm explaining it now, so I've sort of talked about this as much as I can talk. Partnering with Scottsdale, I think they've got one coming online just over the border, I think on Hayden, so it's not right next to our border, but it's not super far away either. That might help a little bit. But if you could project out, I know projections, as we've talked about with this other item earlier today, don't always pan out, but what could people expect looking at these numbers a year from now with R45 and R49? Like, where do we think this is going to go? How close are we going to get back to parity? What could we possibly do about some of the things I started with about the altered level of consciousness, or like what's causing that? There's got to be something. Like, are people really just less safe in some other parts of the city? That just seems like there's only so many ways to fall off a ladder. I mean, injury implies I somehow fell and I broke my arm. It does happen. You guys need to respond. Car accidents, absolutely, you have to respond to every one of those. I understand. It just seems like it's strange that there's 1,000 more. I don't know why the traffic would be tremendously different. We have businesses and everything too. Those are things you might want to talk to the street department about. They're going to put in red light cameras. Well, I voted against the red light cameras. Am I anti-safety? I think it's 12 intersections. That's not really going to solve this problem. This seems bigger than that. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. So that's not the magic elixir. But there must be something. We should at least try. So I do appreciate you coming up with this. This is obviously not the end of the story. So, Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, I would hope that we would at least get written reports about progress being made, because there is some progress to be had. But we also shouldn't pitch it as some kind of finished product either. I don't think that's accurate or really fair. And I'm not saying you were doing that, but anything that, be positive, sure, but also be cognizant that, I'm concerned about your application trend and the number of qualified applicants you're getting, which is also dropping, even though you have enough now. And if you read anything, any article about what younger people, which is really your recruiting pool, want, one of the number one things they want, work from home. Do firefighters work from home? Maybe I missed that. That's probably not an option. I'm guessing, Chief. You can go ahead and smile. It's okay. I'm kidding. I know firefighters don't work from home. Neither do police officers or teachers or the military. What do you guys have in common, all four of you? Trouble recruiting. So somehow you got to turn the narrative around too. And an opportunity to serve your community, maybe, hey, you could work pretty close to home if you grew up on Carefree Highway or something. I don't know. But I would say at this point, you're trying to throw something at a wall and make it stick to reduce these numbers. So I know I raised hunger. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, for going on and on.
Thank you, Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess, Chief, I know this is not the first time we have this conversation, but as you guys are looking at putting this report together, like one thing I want to see in this report is just the access to healthcare, right? And we know that people in District 8 and in District 7 have a harder time having access to good healthcare. Right, we also understand that people in District 7 and District 8 have a really hard time having access to good food, which I know that Councilwoman Hodge Washington and others have been working really hard to bring in better options into these districts. And Councilwoman Ansari and Councilmember Galindo Elvira, I know that that's a lot of work that they're doing as well. And I think also in terms of shade, in terms of parks, in terms of quality areas where families can come together, I know that's a huge issue in these two districts, right? I know that there is a study out there, and maybe that's something that you guys want to bring here or bring some experts to talk about how lifespan in South Phoenix is a lot shorter than it is in other parts of the city. Like quality of life is incredibly important. I think that's something that a lot of us have been struggling with and fighting for a long time, at least since I've been on the council. I know we've had many of us that have been pushing to get these resources into our districts that were not available to our residents before many of us came onto council. I appreciate our city manager's work in terms of bringing equity into different parts of the city. But I think that's very telling with these numbers. These numbers are sad. I'm sure residents in District 7 and in District 8 would give up these resources in exchange to quality of life, which is sometimes not available to them. A lot of these workers, a lot of these families are working class families that probably have 2 to 3 different jobs to be able to provide for their families. So I can see where a lot of the strokes are coming from. I can see why the response times are a lot higher in these parts of the city. In my previous job as a union organizer, a lot of these workers that I used to represent live in these areas, and I know the type of conditions that they sometimes have to live under because they don't make enough money to live a quality of life. So if we can improve, input some of these numbers, Lori, I think that's important. I mean, that's just talking about the day-to-day residents, that is the majority of the people that live in these districts. And, I don't want to talk about all I think District 7 and District 8 have taken the burden of bringing in facilities for folks experiencing homelessness. And I think they're also the highest to have affordable housing units in those districts as well. That's where that's been concentrated. So, a lot of respect for all of those council members throughout the years that have taken on that burden to give someone a place to live. So if we can add all of those numbers together and bring something together, Lori, I think that's important. I do think that we do have to close this gap and give those answers. And I think that, I'm not nervous of saying it, quality of life is very different in certain parts of the city than it is in others. I'm not saying that people should not have services. I think wherever you live, you should have access to an ambulance and into the fire department as soon as they are needed. I think that's also incredibly important. But when we're talking about the raw numbers, I know that those are a lot of the issues, and hoping, I don't know, Chief, when do you think that we can get some sort of report to be able to talk about that?
Chairman Robinson, members of the subcommittee, Councilwoman Guardado, can you please repeat the last part there?
I mean, I think everyone's asking for a report, asking why are the numbers in District 7 and District 8 a lot higher than what they are in other districts? And I think it's important for us to be able to break that down and why that happens. I know, Lori, there's studies already out there that people have done in terms of quality of life and, and the differences between certain parts of the city and others. So we can combine some of those numbers together, maybe incomes of people, what is an annual income in certain parts of the city and other parts of the city? What is it, how much money do people make, the access to healthcare, the access to food? I think all of that is incredibly important. If we can get that, that would be great.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Councilwoman Guardado, we can provide some of that information as soon as the presentation next month in March. Some of the research that already exists and some of the data around, what sorts of facilities are in which districts and those kinds of things. What we can't yet provide is the answer to the questions about why is the call volume the way that it is in each particular district. That's going to take more time working with our partners to try to analyze that and come up with reasons behind that, but we can at least lay the groundwork with the subcommittee if the chairman desires us to do that, to provide some of that contextual information around what the research shows about zip code data and social determinants of health and different factors that may play into why the call volume is higher and what some of the different quality of life issues are in different districts.
If that's okay with you, I think. And then can you just give us a more or less timeline of a bigger report? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? I get it that that's not easy to do, but I think
usually something like that, Councilwoman, takes a period of time. I would say probably my best guess would be about 6 months to really get a good study done and sort through that data. Chief, I don't know if you have a different thought on that.
I think you're absolutely right. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you guys. And I know you guys work really hard, and thank you guys for everything you guys do for us. Thank you, Chairman.
Members of the subcommittee, if I could follow up to that, Councilwoman Guardado, we are also looking at alternative types of response there, just as we do for the community assistance program. I know for us, we've been working on our telehealth program, trying to look at ways that we can improve in those processes where we can divert some of these calls that are more lower acuity type incidents that could give them more appropriate care. We're also looking and working with other partners out there, other opportunities that may be more of what we used to call community paramedicine, where you have somebody responding out and being able to provide care on site there. So there are things that we are working on in the future, and we hope to bring some of that here to this subcommittee.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Waring.
Thank you. And just to be clear, the bond, that would be probably 2028 maybe or something. So that would be a while. We are talking about a tax increase right now. There might be a misnomer. I don't think that's the word, but whatever the correct word is, the tax we're talking about right now does not create more firefighters, nor does it build fire stations, correct?
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Councilman Waring, it's a little bit premature to have that discussion, but there is a possibility, yes, that TPT increase, if approved, could fund both firefighters and fire stations. That's obviously a conversation that the full council will have to have and determine whether or not that is something that should move forward, and if so, where that funding should be applied. That'll be part of the budget process as well.
Mr. Chair, I don't mean to be difficult. Okay, I do. I thought we needed the tax increase to take care of lost revenue from what the legislature did a year or two ago, the rental tax.
If I could, real quick. I'm sorry, Councilman Waring.
Yes.
Let me turn to Ms. Vega. Can we be talking about these issues since they weren't agendized? They weren't on the agenda?
Mr. Chair and committee members, you should stick to items that have been listed on the agenda.
But, Mr. Chair, we are talking about firefighter funding. I understand. I'll just say what we've been saying is this is going to replace lost revenue. That revenue was not paying for new fire stations in District 2. So that's why I'm puzzled. So I would hope we would have some clarity, some different discussion at another time. If that was inappropriate to bring it up, I did it, and now I'm apologizing afterwards. So I apologize for that. But that is a discussion that needs to be had, I guess, at some later date.
Okay, thank you very much. Chiefs Duran and Christ, thank you very much for your presentation. The last item today is a call to the public. I think I have 4 folks. We no longer have a quorum. Can we move forward, no longer have a quorum on the public comments? And while they're discussing that, I apologize to the public who is here for public comment. You sat through a 2.5+ hour long meeting, but without at least 3 members on the dais, we might have a quorum problem. Let me see what our legal folks tell us.
Mr. Chair and committee members, you can accept public comment. You cannot say anything further or make any more decisions.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's good. I know you're here for a very long time. I have 4 people listed. Denise Garcia, if you take the podium, please. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. And I have noticed that there are several public servants here. I, too, am a public servant. I am a constable in the Maryvale precinct. And the reason I am here today is because 2 officers, I am currently a plaintiff in an ongoing litigation. 2 officers with Phoenix PD are defendants, and one of them felt compelled, based on a phone call that I had made to Phoenix PD for an unrelated matter, had come to my home twice. And the second time he came to my home, he approached me, he talked to me. He was not disrespectful in the sense that we would expect a certain type of behavior. However, disrespectful to me in another sense, coming to my home as a defendant, knowing that I am the plaintiff, was completely unacceptable. So I did receive a phone call from a supervisor, his supervisor, who was also at my home at the same time. He and another officer remained near their SUV while Officer Trevino approached me and felt compelled to speak to me. And so after that, I did call and I filed a complaint. And I was told that my name was there or had appeared several times because I had made a few complaints, which was pertaining to my son's homicide committed by these two officers, again, one of which was Trevino, who had shown up to my home. So for the life of me, I could not understand why he would have felt compelled to do so. However, I did file the complaint, and I am hoping that there can be some type of communication where the left hand knows what the right hand's doing, where the leadership at the Phoenix PD department will be able to monitor these types of officers dealing with these type of litigations. And that would be my concern.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, I have Roland Harris.
I just came here to speak on and support Denise today. We both had the same incidences. I have Phoenix Police Department send officers from the Violent Crimes Task Force, and they took place in Jacob's murder. And they came to my house and served a warrant for my brother who didn't even reside there, claiming they were looking for evidence and nothing was even found. That case was later even, my brother already took a plea bargain on that and is already released on probation. And then for me to get a phone call from Denise the other day to tell me that the officer that murdered James came to her house not once but twice. First time he came and sat there and didn't go up to her, and the second time he came back and went up to her. So you knew whose house you were at. And just like the commander who's in this building today, when he was in a meeting with me, we told him that this is a practice and policy showing that this police do this. He tried to say there isn't. Well, obviously now there is, because here they are going to Denise's house doing the same thing. And you guys always, the city always says, well, we can't talk to you because of pending litigation. Well, if you know there's a pending litigation against that officer and he's named as a defendant, she's named for a plaintiff, that officer should have never been at her home. Just like we told them, you guys knew who you were coming at when you came to my home. You knew the officers had something to do with the Violent Crimes Task Force, had something to do with Jacob's murder. But you still allowed them to come to my home. So what I'm saying is right now, under this current presidential administration, the DLJ has been put on hold with the city of Phoenix. So what I'm saying is, you guys say you don't want the DLJ to intervene. Well, show that and start implementing policies and changes now. So in 4 years from now, when the DLJ does come back, because they have reached out to me and they have told me they're not going anywhere. So as soon as this administration is gone, they are coming back for the Phoenix PD. So implement the policies, procedures, and changes now. So in 4 years when they come back, you guys can say, hey, look, we truly don't need you guys to intervene. We don't need to sign a consent decree because we've already made these changes without your oversight. And then for your committee member who's not here to make disparaging comments and call us anti-police, we're not anti-police. I've never been an anti-police person. I am anti-police violence. And maybe we need to educate him on what defunding the police means. It means taking funding from their billion-dollar policies and billion-dollar money that they have and putting it towards programs like schooling, youth programs, homelessness. That's what defunding the police means. It does not mean getting rid of the police. We are not asking to abolish the police. So maybe somebody needs to educate him on that. And I'm tired of every time I want to come up here and comment and react to his comments, he leaves like a coward. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Dr. Mimi Area.
Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Mimi Araya. I live in the city of Phoenix. My baby here was born here in the city of Phoenix in Maricopa County. And I am here today because we have families here who have been victims of police brutality, of City of Phoenix Police Department's violence. And as you've heard them say, not only where their family members murdered by Phoenix Police Department, but then Phoenix Police Department proceeded to have the murderous cop show up to the house of the family member who they killed house and try to proceed to run more investigations on whatever they're looking for. Please, you cannot have people who murdered people's child show up to that person's house of the family where they murdered the child to continue to have conversations about more misconduct, whatever they think is going on. Imagine somebody kills somebody in your family, and then they show up to your house saying that they have more work to do. We killed one member, and now we want to come in and investigate some more stuff. It's absolutely out of this world, not making sense at this point. We've already seen how there was a Department of Justice investigation, yes, and we've seen that Phoenix Police Department disproportionately targets, arrests, and convicts people of color, specifically Black, brown, and indigenous people. And when you look at the families here and what they're byproduct of those statistics. So Jim Mooring wants to sit up here and talk about his family. He's not the only person in the city of Phoenix who's worried about the safety of their families. Just because these people don't look like him and his family does not mean that they don't have genuine concerns about safety. And the Phoenix police are supposed to be there to protect and to keep these families safe, not murdering them. So when we're thinking about public safety, we do need to get more critical about how we're expanding that in ways that are actually helpful for these communities besides policing, arresting, and charging. How are we putting in money, like Roland Harris says, into programs? Let's get to the root causes of issues. Besides saying, hey, you have an issue over there, so we're just going to put you in a cage. That's not solving the issue, the deep core root of the issue that the person may be having. It could be economic disadvantages that they're suffering from. It could be mental illness, mental health issues. You can't solve economic issues in our communities with police. You can't solve issues with mental health with more cops. You have to solve these issues with actual programming, with our public funds into our communities. So we're saying stop. And that's why that's why defunded is a larger rhetoric than what you guys have assumed it is. So please think more critically about how you can protect our families in the future and stop having your cops show up to people's houses after they've murdered their children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last speaker I have is Raquel Breton.
Hello, I'm Raquel. I heard somebody say that the anti-police people might not be here, but we here now, so. And I'm not even trying to come with any general hostility, but I want you to know that the hostility comes from frustration, the frustration of feeling small, unheard, having to meet you only at your convenience. If the average working person could be here at 10 a.m., this whole thing would be filled up. Let's be real here. I'm also a former educator, so I know more than a few ways the city fails us. That's why we're quitting, by the way. This is a hostile environment for all city workers. Our problems are analyzed with the police and crime at the center. Every solution is punishment and statistics with y'all. The police have made enemies out of the public that they claim to serve. And so an earlier question comes back to y'all. Is it so hard to consider the circumstances of others? Y'all would rather throw more numbers at a problem than try to get at its root. Crime is intersectional, so the city needs to think with intersectionality, because hiring more officers and upping the budget has been intellectually lazy. I need you to remember that your business is in and with people and with real backstories. In many ways, the city has failed them since they were born. So instead of wasting time on a comfy chair politely yelling at city workers who present their statistics to you, it might make more sense for y'all and other city employees to find more productive ways to come together and make your departments actually work for the citizens you all serve under. More working sessions, maybe even with the public involved. I don't know, literally anything else, because none of this is working. Otherwise, there's a whole new generation of young adults and teens who are going to continue to release their frustrations in ways that do not serve you or anybody else. We are tired of the back and the forth, honestly and truly. At this point, it'd be easier for y'all to say you want us to shut up and die so that we can just stop trying to plead our case and come in here. It might be easier that way. It's getting ridiculous at this point. And while I still have time, I just want to make it clear here that council members leaving before public comment sections makes this irrelevant. What is the point of this being here if y'all are gonna leave? Unprofessional, absolutely unprofessional. And second, Phoenix PD, you're astray on this. Y'all aren't even my big beef at this point. My beef is with the city because they control y'all too. But listen, putting black people on posters, that's not the representation we asked for. It makes you look like pandering goofies. Please stop doing that. So thank you for your time. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you. That was the last registered speaker. Reference future agenda items.
Just whatever,
You had
whatever we talked
requested.
about, requested earlier. Yes.
Okay. There is one thing, Lori, if we can, and the police are still here, Assistant Chief Elmore, for March 5th, citation in lieu of detention review, isn't that what we just did? Or is this another thing?
This is a different item to speak more about potential policy changes related to that, but we can talk more about that, Chairman, at the chair briefing if you'd like.
Okay, we'll do that. But what I want on there, Vice Mayor O'Brien and I were speaking beforehand, PD's response to mass demonstrations, and we'll be a little bit more specific about what we're looking for. We can talk either later today or tomorrow on that. So with that, thank you very much. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We didn't have any more registered speakers. On the item itself, you're required to.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Bobo spoke at the beginning of the meeting, as you recall, during the public comment section, and she was given 3 minutes to speak.
Sorry, I have 1:15. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Oh.
Million gallons of water this year. Last year we hauled 2.4 million statewide.
For several years now, Arizona Game and